Hello, and welcome to Tired Thinker, a slower corner of the internet, where wonder takes its time and thoughts can simply drift. Tonight's quiet reflection is about something unseen, constant, and endlessly shaping: time. It's the reason we grow older, the seasons turn, and memories slip into the past. We barely notice it moving, and yet it arranges everything. From the rise and fall of civilizations, to the rhythm of your breath, your heartbeat, and even the way a single day can feel both fleeting and infinite. Before we sink into the stillness of this thought, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it right now in your own little stretch of eternity? Strange, isn't it? A video about time, and here we are, scattered across the world, each caught in the same invisible current, yet sharing this moment together. If these slow reflections give you a little ease, or if you're just here to rest your mind after a long day, I'd be so grateful if you gently subscribed or left a quiet like. It helps this small, tired channel find others who might need a pause for thought too. Now, let's begin. Exit denial is a way of keeping people inside an interaction when they would rather leave. It works by making departure feel heavier than staying. The weight is not physical. It is emotional or social. A person may feel guilt or shame. They may fear how they will look if they walk away. They may think others will see them as rude, ungrateful, or weak. These forces act like invisible doors. The door is open. Technically, anyone can leave. But when you step toward it, something makes you pause. That pause is exit denial at work. Think about a child at a family dinner. They finish eating and want to leave the table. Their parent says, "If you go now, everyone will know you don't care about this family." The child does not want to stay, but the cost of leaving has been raised. Leaving no longer looks like a neutral act. It now risks being seen as selfish. The child stays because the price of walking away feels too high. This is exit denial in its simplest form. It shows up in workplaces too. Imagine a team meeting that drags on. You have finished your part and would like to get back to your desk. But the manager says, "If you leave, people will think you are not a team player." That single sentence rewrites the act of standing up. You are not just leaving. You are signaling disloyalty. You might feel the heat of eyes on you. The chairs around the table trap you more than the walls. You stay, not because you want to, but because the social cost outweighs the relief of leaving. Exit denial can also be subtle. You might not notice it until later. Think of a friend who always says, "Oh, so you're leaving already?" They do not shout, they do not insult, but their tone adds a layer of judgment. The act of leaving is reframed as abnormal or unkind. The next time you consider leaving, the memory of that tone sits in your head. You hesitate. You stay longer than you want. You tell yourself it is easier. And in that trade-off, the friend gains more time at your expense. Religious or political groups often use exit denial more intensely. They do not just frame leaving as rude, they frame it as betrayal. A member who quits may be told they are turning their back on truth, on God, or on the cause. They may be warned they will lose their friends, their family, their standing. In some cases, the group spreads stories about those who leave, painting them as corrupt or broken. The message is clear. If you go, you will not only be gone, you will be punished. Staying feels like the only safe path. Even when belief has faded, the fear of exile keeps people in place. You can see exit denial in everyday sales. A person goes to a store to try on shoes. The clerk is friendly and brings pair after pair. When the person hesitates, the clerk says, "I've worked hard finding the right style for you." That line ties the customer's choice to the clerk's effort. If they walk away empty-handed, it looks like they wasted someone's time. The easier path is to buy a pair, even if they did not plan to spend the money. The shoes become the ticket out of a social bind. The clerk has built a small trap. Leaving now carries a cost. Family traditions can serve as exit denial too. Picture a holiday dinner no one enjoys anymore. The food is bland. The conversation is tense. People would rather not attend. But if someone skips, the family says, "So you don't love us enough to be here?" Attendance becomes proof of loyalty. Missing the dinner is framed as disowning the family. The wish to avoid the event is buried under guilt. People show up year after year, not because they want to, but because leaving would feel like betrayal. In social groups, exit denial often ties to fear of judgment. Imagine a book club. You enjoy the first few meetings, then it drags. The group is more about gossip than books. You want to quit, but every time someone else has left, the group mocked them. You can already hear what they will say if you quit. They will call you flaky. They will say you were never serious. So you keep showing up, smiling at the right moments, while wishing you were home. The mockery of others has turned leaving into a risk you avoid. Exit denial can hide inside compliments. A boss might say, "I don't know what we'd do without you." On the surface, it sounds kind, but it ties your presence to the survival of the group. If you leave, you are not just choosing a new path, you are letting others collapse. The guilt holds you in place. You stay, even if you dream of going. The weight of being seen as the one who broke the chain is too heavy. The mechanism grows stronger when combined with sunk costs. You put years into a job, into a relationship, into a project. You think about leaving. Someone reminds you, after all this time, you're just going to walk away? That line does not change your desire. It changes the meaning of it. Now leaving looks like waste. You are not only leaving, you are throwing away years. The pressure doubles. You silence your doubts. You stay longer. The trap tightens. One of the strongest forms of exit denial comes when belonging ties to identity. A fraternity, a guild, a neighborhood association. These groups blur the line between participation and selfhood. The message is clear. To leave the group is to lose who you are. Imagine someone raised in a small religious community. All their friends, teachers, and relatives belong. If they exit, they are not just leaving meetings. They are stepping into a world where they are no longer recognized. Their old name becomes a curse. The fear of being no one is greater than the discomfort of staying. Exit denial here does not whisper. It shouts. Everyday conversations carry small examples too. Think of a partner who says, "If you loved me, you wouldn't leave." The act of leaving is reframed as proof of lack of love. To go now means you admit you do not care. Even if you do care, the line sticks. You want to argue. You want to defend yourself. You stay, not to be happy, but to avoid being misunderstood. The cost of leaving has been twisted into an accusation you do not want to wear. This strategy works because humans fear exclusion more than almost anything. Our brains read rejection as danger. For most of history, to be cast out meant death. That wiring lingers. When exit denial makes leaving feel like exclusion, the body reacts as if survival itself is at stake. You sweat. You tremble. You sit back down. You nod along. You stay, even while your mind screams to go. The trap is complete. Exit denial does not always come from bad intent. Sometimes people use it without thought. A parent might guilt a child into staying home, not to harm them, but because they feel lonely. A friend might shame another for leaving early, not as control, but as a cover for hurt feelings. The tactic can be conscious or unconscious. What matters is the effect. The cost of leaving grows higher than the cost of staying, and so the choice is no longer free. Cognitive overload is not about giving someone too much to think about in a way that challenges them. It is about flooding them with so much raw material that their ability to think at all breaks down. Think of it as the difference between eating a large meal and drinking from a fire hose. One is heavy but possible. The other is impossible. When overload sets in, the mind seeks the path of least resistance, which is often surrender. Picture a town hall where a politician fields questions. Instead of answering directly, the speaker rattles off statistics, committee names, cross-references to regulations, and acronyms. The response looks impressive on the surface, but soon leaves the audience lost. Some try to take notes, others try to recall one point while new ones pour in. The simplest option is to stop questioning. Overload itself becomes the tool. Critical thinking gives way to fatigue. Sales often use this approach. A representative reels off specifications, charts, feature lists, warranty clauses, and add-ons. The customer begins by comparing, but each new detail makes the task harder. Every time they feel close to understanding, more appears. At some point, they give up and accept the salesperson's suggestion. They do not buy from conviction, but from exhaustion. Corporate environments offer another case. A worker asks about a new policy. The manager replies with a flood of attachments, links, and references to legal obligations. The worker may open the first few, but soon drowns in the pile. The effect is clear. They learn not to question further. The policy stands not because it is understood, but because it feels too costly to resist. Authority makes overload especially effective. In a military briefing, recruits hear lists of coordinates, code names, and unit references. Veterans nod along. The recruit, overwhelmed, assumes they miss something important and stays silent. In hospitals, patients often face the same wall. A doctor rattles off lab values, diagnostic codes, and dosages in rapid succession. The patient consents without grasping the meaning. The overload stops questions before they can form. The mind has limits. Working memory holds only a handful of items. Once those slots are full, new information pushes the old out or forces shortcuts. One shortcut is to trust authority. If someone sounds confident while flooding with detail, it feels safer to yield than risk being wrong. Overload does not just tire the listener, it exploits how the mind already works. In courtrooms, overload plays out during cross-examination. A lawyer fires a series of rapid questions filled with dates and names. The witness falters under the pace, even if the questions lack coherence. The jury sees confusion and doubts the witness. The lawyer wins by volume, not substance. In politics, candidates sometimes do the same. One unleashes a barrage of figures. The opponent cannot respond to all of them in time, leaving the impression of weakness. Digital spaces amplify the tactic. Social media feeds pour out claims, statistics, counterarguments, and links. No one can fact-check at that scale. Instead, people rely on surface impressions or repetition. When one side floods with content, critical thinking loses ground. The audience surrenders, not from persuasion, but from drowning. Conspiracy theories thrive on overload. A video might string together dozens of disconnected points, odd numbers, coincidences, partial quotes, and jargon. Debunking each one takes effort, while the casual viewer sees sheer volume and assumes depth. Few sort through every claim, so many conclude there must be truth hidden in the mess. Overload does the convincing. Education sometimes falls into this trap. A teacher who dumps facts without structure leaves students disengaged. When they cannot find a path through the data, they stop asking questions and memorize fragments without understanding. This suits a teacher who prefers compliance over curiosity. The method mirrors politics or sales. Volume replaces clarity. The strength of overload is not in truth, but in excess. Everyone, no matter how intelligent, hits the limit. It is like juggling. You can only keep a few balls in the air. If more keep coming, you drop them. At that point, many stop juggling altogether and let the thrower decide what matters. By the time they realize the flood lacks coherence, they have already surrendered. A city zoning hearing shows the pattern. Residents expect to review one proposal. Instead, officials present slides filled with projections, tax numbers, environmental studies, and legal notes. Residents lose track. Few manage comments, and those who do sound scattered. The decision passes without challenge. The overload has silenced opposition without a fight. On the personal level, overload can win arguments. One partner unleashes a long list of grievances at once. The other cannot address them all and falls silent or concedes just to end it. The victory comes not from reason, but from exhaustion. Modern life makes overload common. News channels stack tickers, graphics, and narratives. And commentary at once. Viewers begin attentive, but soon slip into passivity. At work, inboxes flood, meetings drag with endless slides, and notifications pile up. The employee who once questioned becomes someone who clicks approve without review. Resistance feels impossible under constant weight. The pattern is clear. Overload does not need coherence, it only needs scale. Humans seek relief when thinking grows too hard, and the relief is letting someone else decide. Whether in politics, courtrooms, hospitals, or homes, the flood of information becomes a tool of control. Because it comes wrapped as information, it often passes as truth. Phantom comparison is a way of shaping behavior by creating invisible rivals. It works by telling someone that others would not act the way they do, or that others are better, more loyal, or more reasonable. The rival is never seen. They may not even exist. Yet, the weight of this comparison is heavy because humans are social. We measure ourselves against others, even when those others are imagined. The phantom rival becomes the silent standard you are told to live up to. You are pushed into line, not by rules, but by the fear of falling short. Picture a child who refuses to do their homework. The parent says, "Other kids your age don't fight like this. They just sit down and do it." The child has no way to check. They cannot verify what every other child does, but the claim has power. If they resist, they are not only disobeying, they are failing to match their peers. The parent sets up a race against an invisible crowd. The child stays at the desk, not to learn, but to avoid being seen as the one who lags behind. Phantom comparison shows up in relationships. A partner might say, "No one else would put up with what I put up with." The statement leans on a faceless group of imagined others, each stricter and less forgiving. You are reminded that you are lucky because others would have already left. Doubt grows. You stay not out of joy, but because you fear you cannot measure up to the unseen standard. Workplaces use phantom comparison to enforce conformity. Imagine an employee who questions a policy. The manager says, "Everyone else has no problem with it. You're the only one making this difficult." The rival here is not one person. It is the entire team, framed as agreeable. The worker feels isolated. Even if others secretly share doubts, the claim erases that possibility. The worker falls in line, not because they agree, but because the phantom group has been set against them. Sales tactics rely on it too. A customer looks at a product and hesitates. The salesperson says, "Most people buy this without thinking twice. You're different." The hesitation is reframed as a flaw. The customer imagines a mass of others, decisive and satisfied. To avoid standing out as odd, they buy. The rivals never need to exist. The fear of being the only one drives the sale. Social groups often use phantom comparison to police behavior. A teenager stays home instead of going to a party. Their friend says, "Everyone else is going. You don't want to be the only one missing out, do you?" The phantom group is the entire peer circle, painted as unified. To refuse is to risk exclusion. The teen imagines arriving at school and hearing stories they cannot join. The fear of being marked different pushes them to go, even when they never wanted to. Parents sometimes frame phantom rivals as role models. A child complains about chores. The parent says, "When I was your age, I never argued. I just did what I was told." The rival is not only invisible, but historical. It is a younger version of the parent perfected in memory. The child is asked to measure themselves against a story that cannot be challenged. The parent builds an unreachable standard, and the child is forced to chase it. In more coercive settings, phantom comparison takes the form of threats. A group leader may tell a member, "Others are more committed than you. They give more, they believe deeper. You need to catch up." The member cannot see these others. They cannot confirm their effort. Yet the claim works because it feeds the fear of falling short. The member tries harder, not to reach a real goal, but to escape the judgment of rivals who may not exist. Romantic manipulation often leans on phantom comparison. A partner might say, "Any other man would treat me better," or "Any other woman would appreciate me more." The rival here is generic. The message is simple: you are failing where others would succeed. The accused partner feels inadequate. They may bend to demands, not out of love, but out of fear that they are already losing a competition they never agreed to enter. The phantom rival sits like a shadow in the room, shaping choices with every word. Even casual remarks can carry this weight. A teacher might say, "Other students don't need this much help." A coach might say, "Your teammates push harder." The intention may be to motivate, but the effect is isolation. The student or athlete feels singled out. They picture unseen peers, all stronger or smarter. They push themselves to close the imagined gap. The phantom rivals become the silent push that keeps them running. Phantom comparison feeds on the human need to belong. From childhood, we are trained to measure ourselves against others. We watch grades, scores, ranks, and performance charts. We learn that our value is not in what we are, but in how we compare. The phantom rival twists this instinct. Instead of a real person, the rival is vague or false. Yet the brain reacts the same way. You feel the sting of being behind. You feel the pressure to catch up. You conform, even when the standard is made of smoke. This method is effective because it leaves no way to fight back. If someone insults you directly, you can argue. If they set a clear rule, you can choose to follow or reject it. But when they summon phantom rivals, you have nothing to grip. They are unseen. You cannot test them or speak to them. They exist only in the claim. And because they are invisible, they are always better, always stronger, always ideal. You cannot win. You can only strive not to be the worst. It also works because people fear being alone in their stance. Most would rather bend than face the shame of being singled out. A person told they are the only one resisting imagines a crowd watching. They picture whispers or disdain. They surrender not because the demand makes sense, but because the thought of being the odd one is unbearable. The phantom rival does not need to be real. The mind fills in the details, and the fear does the rest. Sometimes phantom comparison is used without malice. A parent may say, "Other kids behave better," as a clumsy attempt at discipline. A boss may say, "Other employees manage this fine," out of frustration. The intent may not be to manipulate, but the result is the same. The listener feels pressure to measure up to shadows. They act, not from choice, but to escape the weight of being less than invisible others. Strategic timing is about knowing when to press an issue, not just how to press it. The moment matters as much as the message. A request can feel heavy or harmless depending on the state of the person hearing it. People are not equally strong at every hour. Fatigue, distraction, or stress lowers resistance. The same words that might meet resistance in the morning can slide through at night when someone's guard is down. This is not an accident, but a tactic. Choosing the right moment can turn no into yes. Think about a family setting. A child wants permission to go out late. They know asking during the day risks a flat refusal. The parent is busy, alert, and ready to argue. Instead, the child waits until the parent returns from work, tired and wanting peace. The request comes at the kitchen table while the parent eats. The parent may not have the energy to debate. Instead of weighing the rules, they wave a hand and say, "Fine, go." The timing made the difference. The parent's mental state mattered more than the request itself. In the workplace, timing plays the same role. An employee who wants approval for a new project knows not to ask during a tense budget meeting. Instead, they wait until the manager has sat through a long day, just before heading home. The manager is tired, eager to end the day, and less likely to dig into details. A nod and quick approval replace the careful scrutiny that would come at another time. The employee understood that waiting for fatigue created an easier path. Distraction works much the same. Picture a colleague who wants you to cover part of their shift. If they ask when you are free and focused, you might weigh the cost and decline. But if they approach while you are handling a call, answering emails, and dealing with interruptions, you may say yes just to move on. The distraction opens the door. You agree without thinking deeply because your attention is elsewhere. The ask was timed to slip through gaps in focus. In negotiations, lawyers and politicians know the value of strategic timing. A proposal introduced late at night, after hours of debate, often faces less resistance than one introduced in the morning. Legislators are drained, eager to go home, and less willing to fight over details. Deals get passed in those late hours, not because they are stronger, but because people are weaker. The fatigue shapes the outcome. Timing, not merit, becomes decisive. The same happens in personal relationships. A spouse who wants to spend money on a purchase might wait for a moment when their partner is under stress from another problem. In that moment, the partner may not want another argument. They agree, not because they support the purchase, but because they cannot handle one more demand. Later, they might regret it, but the decision has already been made. The request succeeded because it came at a moment of lowered resistance. This method does not rely on deception in the content. It relies on the human reality that energy, focus, and mood fluctuate. Everyone knows the feeling of giving in at the end of a long day. Supermarkets exploit this with product placement. Candy and snacks sit near the register, not at the start of the store. Shoppers at the end of a trip are tired from walking aisles, deciding between options, and waiting in line. Their patience is worn thin. At that moment, resisting one more choice feels harder. Many give in and grab the candy. Timing is the lever. Consider politics again. During crises, leaders often push measures that would meet resistance in calmer times. Citizens tired from watching nonstop coverage, stressed about safety, or fearful about the future, accept decisions they might otherwise challenge. The timing shapes public mood. People accept controls, spending, or restrictions they would normally debate. The ask is not new, but the moment makes it pass. The legal system provides another example. Police interrogations sometimes stretch long into the night. Suspects grow tired, hungry, and disoriented. A request to confess or sign a statement made after hours of questioning meets less resistance than one made fresh at the start. The timing is designed to exploit exhaustion. The words are the same, but the state of the person hearing them has shifted. Compliance comes easier under fatigue. Strategic timing often appears small, almost invisible in daily life. A roommate waits until you are running late to ask for money they owe to be delayed. A coworker waits until you are buried in tasks to ask for your help with theirs. A friend asks for a favor while you are upset about something else, knowing you will say yes to avoid more conflict. None of these rely on persuasion in the usual sense. They rely on catching you when your defenses are low. The technique can even appear in sales. A car dealer may drag out the process of buying with endless paperwork, waiting until the buyer is tired and just wants to leave. Then they present extra warranties or add-ons. At that moment, the buyer agrees to avoid prolonging the ordeal. The dealer knows the timing makes refusal harder. The product has not changed. The customer's state has. Human behavior makes this possible. Fatigue reduces self-control. Distraction limits processing. Stress narrows focus. Vulnerability makes relief more attractive than resistance. Timing aligns the request with those states. It works not by overpowering, but by sliding in when the mind is weakest. Like a lock picked not with force, but with finesse, timing turns resistance into compliance. Imagine a military commander waiting until soldiers are hungry and exhausted before giving a hard order. At that point, debate or refusal feels impossible. The order gets carried out without question. In hospitals, patients about to undergo surgery often face requests for signatures on consent forms. Distracted by fear or sedated by drugs, they sign without fully weighing details. The forms could have been explained earlier, but the timing ensures quick agreement. Even in classrooms, timing shapes outcomes. A teacher may ask students for extra assignments or responsibilities at the end of a long lesson when students want to leave. Many nod along without considering what they agreed to. Timing makes them pliant. Later, they realize the cost, but by then, agreement has already been given. Strategic timing shows itself in arguments too. One partner may choose to raise a sensitive issue right before bed, knowing the other will not want to start a long discussion. Agreement or surrender comes just to end the moment. The tactic relies not on strength of reasoning, but on the wariness of the listener. In organizations, this method can be institutionalized. Votes scheduled for late nights, policy rollouts timed during holidays, announcements made when attention is elsewhere. Each uses timing as a shield. By catching people tired, distracted, or off guard, resistance weakens. This is why unpopular decisions often appear at the end of the week or late at night. Timing dulls the response. The key to all these examples is the same. People do not hold equal strength at every hour. Energy, focus, and resilience rise and fall. Strategic timing takes advantage of those cycles. A well-timed request bypasses scrutiny, not because it is right, but because the listener cannot summon the effort to resist. It is less about what is asked and more about when it is asked. False equivalence bends arguments by treating two things as equal when they are not. It draws a line between unrelated situations and claims they are the same. On the surface, this may sound balanced. Underneath, it hides an unfair stance. It shifts attention away from the real issue and allows the speaker to avoid responsibility or blur the truth. Comparison itself is not the problem. Humans compare everything. The problem begins when the comparison is false, when things that do not match are treated as equal to defend a position. A parent might say, "When I was your age, I never talked back, so if you talk back, you don't respect me." At first glance, this sounds like a reasonable link, but the parent is not the child, and the situations are not the same. The world has changed. The memory of childhood may not even be accurate, yet the claim gives the parent leverage. It silences the child by tying behavior to respect, even though those two things are not equal. In politics, false equivalence is common. Imagine a debate where one candidate is accused of corruption. Instead of addressing the accusation, they say, "The other candidate also takes donations, so we are the same." The comparison hides a difference in scale. Accepting legal donations is not the same as engaging in corruption. Yet by pairing them, the candidate muddies the water. Listeners hear both names attached to wrongdoing and decide the fault must be shared. You see false equivalence in everyday family life too. A teenager says, "You spend hours on your phone, so why can't I?" The claim equates an adult controlling their own schedule with a child still under limits for health and rest. The situations are not equal, but the comparison shifts focus and puts the parent on the defensive. The teen avoids the real question about boundaries by pointing to a false match. False equivalence also thrives in oversimplification. Someone may say, "If I can't say whatever I want at work, then I don't have free speech." Here, a workplace code of conduct is equated with government censorship. Free speech protects against government punishment, not private consequences. The claim reduces a complex idea into a misleading match that feels neat but ignores the difference. In relationships, one partner might justify harm by pointing to something minor. Imagine one partner yells in anger. The other replies, "Well, you left the dishes in the sink, so we're even." Forgetting chores is not equal to verbal aggression, but placing them side by side creates the illusion of balance. The partner avoids accountability by presenting the unfair stance that both are equally at fault. False equivalence can discredit real concerns. Consider a workplace where an employee raises issues about unsafe conditions. The manager says, "Every job has risks. You could get hurt driving to work." A car accident is random. Unsafe workplace conditions are preventable and tied to responsibility. By equating them, the manager justifies not acting. The comparison distracts from what can be fixed by pointing to what cannot. Advertising makes use of this tactic. A product might be marketed as natural, just like the food your grandparents ate. The link ties processed goods to nostalgic images of simple living. They are not the same, but the comparison creates trust. The stance is unfair because it exploits memory while ignoring reality. In moral debates, someone caught cheating might say, "Everyone lies sometimes. You've lied too." A small white lie is equated with betrayal. Both are framed as dishonesty, but the scale and consequence are not the same. Forgetting to mention being late is not equal to hiding an affair. By flattening the difference, the cheater shields themselves behind the illusion of shared guilt. False equivalence shows up in schools. A student complains a teacher is harsh. The teacher replies, "I'm strict with everyone." The student knows the treatment is uneven, but the statement ties it to a general rule. The claim erases difference and sounds like fairness. The student may give up, thinking they cannot argue against it. It appears in wider social conflicts. When one group calls for justice, another replies, "Everyone suffers. We all face struggles." Systemic harm differs from individual hardship, but the two are placed side by side. By equating them, the speaker avoids acknowledging imbalance. Inequality is made to look natural, and the unfair stance is that no change is needed because pain is framed as universal. False equivalence works because humans are wired to seek fairness. We want balance. So when someone pairs two situations, our minds accept the frame. We do not always pause to measure scale or consequence. That gap is where the tactic operates. The speaker gains power not from truth, but from the appearance of symmetry. It also thrives in quick arguments. A roommate complains about noise. The other replies, "You leave the lights on, so we both annoy each other." Noise that disrupts sleep is not equal to a light bill, but the pairing creates the illusion of equal blame. The conversation ends in balance that never existed. Rules are another common ground. Someone might say, if kids can't wear hats in school, teachers shouldn't either. Students and teachers play different roles. One follows structure, the other enforces it. Equating the two makes the rule seem unfair. Focus shifts from purpose to imagined imbalance. The unfair stance hides behind a claim of equal treatment. Even families use it. A sibling caught stealing might say, "You borrowed my shirt without asking, so we're equal." Borrowing is not the same as theft. Yet linking the two creates a sense of shared fault. The harm is reduced, and the siblings end up in a stalemate where the real issue is blurred. False equivalence is persuasive because it appeals to the desire for simple answers. Real differences are messy. They take time to explain. Equating unrelated things makes the conversation short. It reframes complexity as symmetry. The tactic succeeds not because it is true, but because it feels neat. Selective amnesia is a tactic. A person pretends to forget facts that get in the way of what they want. The gaps are not random. They protect the person and erase accountability. It looks harmless because everyone forgets things. That is the cover. The tactic works because memory is fuzzy and most people avoid conflict. When someone shrugs and says, "I don't remember," the room tends to move on. Picture a partner who promised to pay the utility bill. The due date passes. Service gets cut, and you bring it up. They say, "You never asked me to handle it." You pull up the text. They shift to, "I thought you meant next month." Their memory erases the part that proves responsibility. Now you are arguing over words, not the unpaid bill. The problem is still there, but the pressure on them has eased. In a team meeting, the manager sets a deadline. The team delivers. Then the manager asks for 2 more features. When someone points to the original plan, the manager says, "I don't recall agreeing to that version." The changelog proves it, but the denial slows the pushback. People shuffle through notes. The meeting drags. The missing memory clears a path for scope creep. Politics offers countless examples. The spokesperson makes a firm claim on camera. Days later, when the claim draws criticism, they say, "I don't remember saying that." The footage exists, but the denial muddies the record. The audience hears 2 versions: the original and the denial. Confusion buys time, and time weakens outrage. Sales often uses the move. A rep promises a feature during a demo. The contract leaves it vague. Later, the feature is absent. The customer complains. The rep says, "We discussed it as part of the roadmap, not as a guarantee." The rep remembers the flexible version, not the firm one. The omission keeps the deal safe, and the customer has little ground because the paperwork backs the selective memory. In families, the tactic controls outcomes. A teenager recalls getting permission to attend a party. The parent says, "I never said yes, I said we'd see." The teen remembers yes. The parent remembers maybe. There is no written record. Authority wins. The teen learns that permission must be documented, or it can be erased. Friendships can carry the same weight. A friend borrows money. You set a payback date. When it arrives, they say, "I thought you meant my next paycheck." You remind them the date was last Friday. They reply, "You said we could be flexible." The word was never used. They add it to the past to protect themselves. You feel petty pressing harder, so you drop it. Their relief comes at your expense. Negotiations often hinge on memory. Both sides outline terms. Later, one side forgets concessions and recalls only the wins. They claim the notes miss their core point. You spend energy bargaining back to ground you already covered. The delay favors the side that can stall. Memory gaps become bargaining tools. Compliance cases show it too. A manager fails to file a safety report. When asked, they say, "I thought facilities owned that task." The task list shows otherwise. They reply, I never saw that list. The file shows they were tagged. They say they must have missed the alert. Each step erases duty in small pieces. What was a clear miss becomes a fog of excuses. The difference between honest forgetting and selective amnesia is the pattern. Honest forgetting cuts both ways. It sometimes hurts and sometimes helps. Selective amnesia only goes one way. It deletes receipts, agreements, and promises. It keeps praise and claims that help. If someone always remembers what benefits them and never what binds them, it's not chance. It is a tactic. The move pairs well with vague language. People who plan to forget later often speak in soft terms. We'll see, we'll try, later, as needed. When held to those words, they claim a different reading. They never gave a clear yes, they say, only agreement in principle. Ambiguity gives them room to rewrite later. It also pairs with blame shifting. After forgetting comes the turn. You should have reminded me. You know I'm bad with dates. You know I need nudges. The burden moves from the person who promised to the person who trusted the promise. Over time, you end up carrying their reminders, their calendar, even their accountability. Their lapses become your workload. You can counter selective amnesia calmly. Write things down. Send short recap notes. Replace soon with a date. Replace will try with we will deliver X by Y. Confirm who owns what. Say, can I write this down as we agreed? A person acting in good faith welcomes it. Someone planning to forget later resists. The reaction tells you a lot. In live talks, close the loop. Say, you will do A, I will do B. The deadline is Friday at noon. Does this match your view? Get a yes, then send the summary in writing. It takes a minute and saves hours later. The fog has less room to form. When someone claims a lapse, treat it as a gap, not a crime. Say, no problem. Here is the note from last week. Hand them the record. Do not get pulled into debating motives. You do not need to prove they faked it. You just need to anchor facts. Calmly pointing to the record prevents escalation and still closes the gap. If the pattern repeats, narrow trust. Break tasks into smaller steps. Shorten intervals. Ask for checkpoints. Say, step 1 by Tuesday, step 2 by Friday. If they object, ask what timeline they can own. Put that in writing. Their own dates become the test. The tactic also relies on social discomfort. People do not want to look strict. Asking for receipts or minutes feels cold. Selective amnesia exploits that. Reframe it. Say, I want us both to succeed, so I'm writing this down. Most people accept that. Those who push back show their preference for looseness, and looseness is where this tactic grows. In group projects, visible artifacts help. Keep a shared doc for decisions. Record meeting minutes in plain language. Move key items out of chat threads into one agreed source. When someone says, I don't remember, you point to the record. Do it calmly each time. Over time, the culture shifts. The tactic loses ground in a room that runs on records. Selective amnesia can slip into gaslighting. Instead of saying, I forgot, the person says, that never happened. The danger rises when there are no records. If you sense this, save copies, bring a third person to key talks, and use neutral phrases like for clarity or as discussed. The goal is not to turn every chat into a trial. The goal is a fair track of what was agreed. Of course, some lapses are real. Trauma, illness, or overload can damage recall. Be humane. Offer prompts. Break tasks down. But genuine memory issues do not always protect the same person from the same kind of duty. If gaps always fall in their favor, you are looking at strategy, not biology. The test is asymmetry. Notice where precision drops. If details vanish only when they owe time, money, or apology, adjust your approach. Keep the tone calm. Keep the record clear. Hold the boundary without drama. Memory can blur. Agenda does not. Social proof hijacking is the use of a fake or exaggerated sense of agreement to make a claim seem stronger than it is. Instead of relying on evidence, the speaker leans on an imaginary crowd. Phrases like, "Everyone thinks this," "Most people know it," or "The experts all agree," create the illusion of consensus. Humans often look to others when uncertain. If we believe many agree, we drop our guard. That instinct is natural, but when the consensus is false, it bypasses critical thought. Picture a manager introducing a new policy. Instead of explaining its value, they say, "Every other department is already on board." No one in the room knows if this is true, but the suggestion of unanimous support makes dissent awkward. An employee may think, "If everyone else agreed, I should not resist." The imaginary consensus shapes behavior more than the facts. Salespeople use this tactic often. A customer hesitates. The salesperson says, "Everyone who tries this product loves it. Most of my clients choose it." The vague "everyone" or "most" makes refusal feel strange. The imagined group persuades, not the product itself. Politics runs on the same trick. A candidate declares, "The people have spoken. Everyone knows this policy is the only fair choice." No numbers are cited, but the claim frames resistance as opposition to the will of the people. Audience members hold back, not wanting to stand apart. In classrooms, the tactic shows up when a teacher says, "All the other classes have already adjusted to this rule." Students cannot check the claim, but the pressure of being the last holdouts pushes them toward compliance. The method works because people rely on social cues. If you see one restaurant crowded and another empty, you assume the crowd knows best. That shortcut helps in real life, but when someone fabricates the cue, the instinct gets exploited. The brain responds to the appearance of consensus, even if it is invented. In corporate meetings, the same pattern appears. One executive might say, "Every other firm is moving this way." Whether true or not, the statement pressures others to nod along. No one wants to appear as the only one resisting what is framed as an industry standard. Media also uses this device. Headlines say, "Experts say," or "Americans believe," without naming sources. The phrase alone implies mass approval. Readers accept it without checking. Repetition across outlets deepens the illusion. Courtrooms show how powerful it can be. A lawyer tells a jury, "No reasonable person would disagree with this." The statement paints dissent as irrational. Jurors, concerned about how peers view them, conform to the supposed consensus. At home, one partner might say, "All our friends think you're unfair about this," even if no friend has said so. The weight of the imaginary group pressures the other partner to concede. The argument is won not by logic, but by invoking invisible allies. Advertising has leaned on this for decades. Phrases like "America's favorite" or "the product everyone is switching to" make viewers want to join the crowd. The words rarely rest on data. The hint of mass approval does the work. The tactic can be quiet too. A boss may say, "We all agree this is the best path forward," even if a few do not. Speaking up means not only disagreeing, but also challenging the claim of unity. Many stay silent, and the silence then looks like agreement. The danger is that people surrender judgment before examining evidence. A student may join a risky program after hearing, "All your classmates are signing up." A patient may accept a treatment after, "Every patient in your situation chooses this option." Decisions happen not through reasoning, but fear of standing alone. Online, the effect multiplies. Comments like, "Everyone knows," or "Nobody disagrees," repeat until they feel true. A newcomer scrolling through may assume broad consensus and fall in line. The number of real supporters may be small, but the illusion has power. The tactic is effective because few stop to verify. If someone says, All the experts agree, most lack the time or means to check. The burden of proof shifts. The listener assumes if everyone agrees, the debate must be settled. In organizations, leaders sometimes use this in votes. A chair might open by saying, "We already have near unanimous support." Undecided members feel boxed in. To oppose now looks stubborn. Even if support is thin, the phrase speeds decisions. The weight grows with repetition. When multiple people say, "We all know," or "Everyone supports this," the atmosphere itself feels like consensus. By the time anyone pauses to question, the choice may already be locked in. This tactic works because being the lone dissenter is uncomfortable. Most prefer not to stand out. A speaker who says, "Everyone agrees," counts on that discomfort. It feels easier to stay silent than to risk isolation. Silence then reinforces the illusion. The false consensus creates compliance, and compliance strengthens the sense of consensus. Conditional vulnerability is not genuine openness. It is a controlled release of detail meant to lower defenses. Instead of sharing out of honesty, the person reveals just enough to create trust or sympathy. They decide what to expose and when, keeping control over the exchange. True intimacy involves risk and mutual honesty. Conditional vulnerability creates the impression of closeness while holding back the real self. It is a tactic, not a connection. Picture a manager introducing a new directive. They say, "I know change is hard. When I first started here, I doubted if I could handle the role." On the surface, this sounds open, but the story is vague, safe, and placed in the past. The manager reveals something human without risking embarrassment now. Employees feel closer and less likely to resist. The detail was chosen for effect, not honesty. In sales, the move looks similar. A representative tells a hesitant buyer, "I was nervous when I bought my first car. I worried I'd make the wrong choice." It sounds like they share the customer's concern. In truth, the detail is rehearsed and harmless. The buyer lowers their guard, thinking they share a bond. The salesperson gains trust without exposing anything real. Politics offers another case. A candidate says, "I grew up struggling. My family didn't have much, and some nights' dinner was small." The story may be true, but it is trimmed to build sympathy while hiding advantages that also shape their path. The audience hears vulnerability, but the disclosure is selective. The intimacy feels authentic, yet it is crafted for persuasion. This pattern shows up in relationships too. Someone says, "I've had my share of struggles with relationships. I don't always get it right." It sounds raw, but it carries no detail that risks judgment. The listener feels invited into closeness. Yet the speaker gives away little. Trust flows one way. The tactic works because humans respond to vulnerability. When someone shares a weakness, we feel closer and often answer in kind. Conditional vulnerability exploits that instinct. The speaker offers just enough to spark openness, but not enough to lose control. The imbalance leaves one person exposed and the other secure. In job interviews, the tactic is common. A candidate admits, "I sometimes struggle with being too detail-oriented. I can get caught up in making things perfect." It sounds like a flaw, but it frames strength as weakness. The candidate gains credit for honesty without real risk. The interviewer believes they've seen something personal, but the detail is managed. Workplace leaders use it to control morale. During layoffs, a CEO might write, "This has been the hardest period of my career. I've lost sleep. I've even cried with my family." The message makes employees think they share the burden. In truth, the leader remains secure while workers face real loss. The emotion softens anger and builds compliance. In friendships, someone may say, "I've always been insecure about how I come across socially." The listener feels touched and opens up further. Later, they realize the first admission was shallow and safe. The balance tilts. One side holds true secrets, the other does not. Online, influencers often practice this. Posts read, "I doubt myself sometimes," or "I'm not always confident." These curated flaws make them relatable, but never risk real damage. Followers feel intimacy and trust, which then get used to build loyalty or sell products. The vulnerability is staged for influence. Negotiators can also use the tactic. A lawyer might say, "This case has taken a lot out of me. I've worried about how it affects my family." The opposing side relaxes, thinking they've glimpsed the human behind the role, but nothing useful has been revealed. The disclosure is meant to disarm, not to connect. The strategy relies on reciprocity. When someone seems open, we feel pressure to respond. They reveal a detail, so we reveal one. They admit a weakness, so we share one too. But if their detail is shallow, the exchange becomes one-sided. They walk away with information. We walk away exposed. Consider a new employee. A manager says, "When I started here, I was overwhelmed too. I even doubted myself." The employee, reassured, begins to share struggles. The manager learns about their doubts and vulnerabilities. Later, those details may shape evaluations or assignments. The employee thought trust was mutual. In truth, only they were open. Dating provides another example. One partner says, "I've been hurt before," and sometimes worry about opening up. The other responds with real stories of heartbreak. The first admission was broad and safe. The second was personal and risky. The imbalance is set from the start. Conditional vulnerability is powerful because it feels real. The listener drops their guard, shares openly, and senses intimacy. Later, they may realize how little was actually given by the other side. The controlled disclosure shaped the moment, created trust, and left one person holding risk while the other gained influence. It looks like openness, but it is strategy. Paradoxical framing is a tactic where someone offers two opposite choices, but whichever option you pick, they gain the advantage. It looks like freedom of choice, but it is not. The frame is built so that either decision serves the manipulator. You feel you are deciding, but you are only moving along paths they set. Think of a parent speaking to a teenager. The parent says, "You can either go out and prove you don't care about your family, or you can stay home and show respect." Both paths tie back to the parent's control. If the teen goes out, they are branded selfish. If they stay, the parent wins compliance. The teen is not choosing freely. They are choosing between two labels, both invented by the parent. In a workplace, a manager may say, "You can either stay late to finish this task, or you can leave on time and show you don't care about the team." Staying late delivers more work. Leaving on time delivers guilt and loss of reputation. The manager benefits either way. The employee is not choosing between work and rest. They are choosing how to lose. Paradoxical framing works because people like to believe they have a choice. When two options are placed side by side, it feels balanced. The manipulation hides in the setup because both are tilted. It is like walking into a maze where every path leads back to the same door. You walk around thinking you are exploring, but all routes return you to the result they planned. Romantic relationships often use this frame. One partner might say, "If you loved me, you'd stay. If you leave, it shows you don't care." Stay, and they get your time. Leave, and they gain moral ground to accuse you. Both choices strengthen their position. Politics thrives on this tactic. A leader may say, You can either support this law or you can side with chaos. It sounds like a choice between order and disorder, but rejecting the law does not equal supporting chaos. Still, the frame makes dissent look reckless. Citizens feel cornered. Support or silence both serve the leader. Sales uses the same structure. A rep says, you can buy today and save, or wait and lose. Either way, pressure mounts. Buying gives them a commission. Waiting makes the customer feel foolish, which still pushes them back toward the deal. Both outcomes feed the sale. Discipline in schools can work the same way. A teacher might say, you can admit you broke the rule, or we can assume you don't respect authority. Admitting guilt cements control. Denying it shifts the debate to respect, which also cements control. The student cannot win because both paths end in submission. Families use it too. A sibling might say, either you help me or I'll know you don't care. Helping gives them labor. Refusing gives them guilt leverage. Both outcomes serve them. The family dynamic slowly trains everyone to comply. Leaders in groups frame dissent in this way as well. Imagine a volunteer team where someone questions strategy. The leader says, you can support the plan, or you can hold the group back. Support validates the leader. Opposition brands the critic as harmful. Whichever path is taken, the leader remains strong. Paradoxical framing often attaches identity. If you pick one option, you are good. If you pick the other, you are bad. A child might be told, eat your vegetables and be strong, or refuse and stay weak. Eating gives the parent control. Refusing gives them power through shame. The child is not deciding about food. They are deciding which label to wear. The tactic masks control as freedom. The person being framed feels in charge. They weigh two paths. They make a choice. But both choices were designed to benefit the manipulator. It is like flipping a coin where both sides are heads. Moral pressure makes it stronger. A boss may say, join us for the weekend project, or admit you're not dedicated. Dedication is defined on their terms. Accepting means free labor. Refusing means carrying the label of disloyalty. The boss benefits from either. Friends use it casually. Either you come with us, or you're boring. If you join, they get company. If you refuse, they gain the power to brand you dull. The language is light, but the control is real. The tactic grows sharper with time pressure. A salesperson may say, sign now and secure the discount, or wait and lose it. Acting now feeds the sale. Waiting creates guilt. Both paths keep the customer in their orbit. The trick lies in narrowing the field. Real choice means multiple paths with different outcomes. Paradoxical framing reduces it to two and hides the rest. A politician may say, you are either with us or against us. Neutrality, conditional support, or alternatives are cut away. The binary locks the debate into a false reality. Sometimes fear drives both options. A parent may say, obey me now and avoid punishment, or disobey and face worse later. Both roads point to fear. The parent benefits whether the child yields or resists, because even resistance strengthens their authority. Sometimes reward is used. The boss may say, take this extra task and you'll impress leadership. Refuse and you'll show courage for standing your ground. On the surface, both options look positive, but both serve the boss. They either gain extra work or the image of managing a bold employee. The paradox turns all roads into wins for them. This tactic works because humans dislike uncertainty. Binary options feel clear and simple. The manipulator uses this instinct. They present two neat choices, but both are rigged. The target feels decisive when they pick, even though the choice was staged. In groups, the effect is stronger. A leader may say, we can either unite behind this plan or break apart in division. Unity validates them. Division isolates dissenters. Both results reinforce their control. The group feels they must choose, but both outcomes return power to the leader. Paradoxical framing is subtle. It presents options calmly, even logically, yet both options feed the same outcome. The freedom you feel is staged. The decision was never yours. The frame itself is the trap. Misdirection praise works by drawing attention to something pleasant but irrelevant when a real issue is raised. Instead of addressing the concern, the speaker offers a compliment. The listener feels good and may soften or forget the problem. Most people respond well to praise even when it is misplaced. By mixing positive words with evasion, the speaker sidesteps accountability while appearing kind. Picture an employee questioning missed deadlines. The manager replies, "I really admire your work ethic. You always put in so much effort." The compliment does not address delays. It makes the employee feel valued while steering the focus away. If the employee accepts the praise, the issue remains unresolved. In politics, a journalist asks about unemployment. The candidate smiles and says, "That's a great question. I respect how thorough your reporting always is." The praise flatters, but avoids substance. The audience hears warmth, not a real answer. In relationships, the same move appears. One partner complains about lack of help around the house. The other replies, "You're so good at keeping everything in order. I could never do it as well as you." It sounds sweet, but leaves the imbalance untouched. The complaint is covered with flattery. Salespeople use it too. A customer challenges the high price. The salesperson says, "I can tell you're someone who cares about quality. Not everyone notices details the way you do." The ego stroke replaces an explanation. The buyer may focus on the compliment rather than the cost. In workplaces, misdirection praise can silence criticism. A team points out flaws in a process. The leader says, "I love how dedicated you all are to making this company better." Effort is acknowledged, but the flaw remains. Over time, employees may stop raising issues, expecting only praise in return. In courtrooms, a lawyer facing scrutiny for mishandled evidence might say, "I appreciate the court's commitment to fairness. It sets a standard I respect." The compliment flatters, but diverts attention from mistakes. This works because people crave recognition. Praise feels good, so we often accept it without questioning the motive. That small sense of validation can dull focus. The issue slips into the background. Parents sometimes use it. A teen asks about curfew. The parent replies, "I'm proud of how responsible you are with your homework." The praise may be true, but irrelevant to the request. The teen feels acknowledged but frustrated. Teachers may use it to calm students. A student questions grading. The teacher answers, "You always have such insightful questions." The complaint remains unresolved, hidden behind recognition. In negotiations, one side presses for clarity. The other replies, "I appreciate how sharp you are in catching details like that." The praise deflects, leaving ambiguity intact. The tactic thrives because the compliment is often believable. The timing is the clue. When praise appears instead of an answer, it serves as camouflage. The listener may not notice in the moment that the concern was avoided. In conflicts, the move is common. A friend arrives late and is confronted. They say, "You're always so understanding. I value that about you." The praise softens the moment, but leaves the lateness unaddressed. Professional evaluations show the same pattern. An employee asks why they were passed over for promotion. The supervisor replies, "You bring such a positive energy. Everyone enjoys working with you." Pleasant words replace direct feedback. The employee leaves without clarity. Advertising uses this constantly. "You're smart enough to know quality when you see it," or "People like you deserve the best." The praise has nothing to do with price or flaws. It shifts focus to the buyer's ego. In politics, leaders avoid accountability by praising the public. Faced with criticism, they speak about the strength and wisdom of the people. The applause distracts from policy failures. The tactic works because it gives something while taking away something else. The listener feels valued, but loses clarity. Praise masks avoidance. Most people want to believe compliments are sincere, so they accept them. That acceptance allows the distraction to succeed. Misdirection praise does not deny the problem outright. It places something shiny next to it, hoping attention drifts. On its own, the compliment is harmless. In context, it changes the conversation. Praise becomes a shield against scrutiny, sounding kind while serving control. Context collapse is a tactic where someone blends separate conversations, situations, or agreements so that lines blur and responsibility gets lost. Instead of addressing one point, they fold different issues together. The effect is confusion. Accountability slips away because nothing stands on its own. Everything gets mashed into one gray field where nothing can be pinned down. Think of a partner who forgot groceries. You bring it up. Instead of answering, they say, "We've both been bad at keeping up with things. Remember when you forgot the trash last week?" Two unrelated events are linked. The focus shifts from yesterday's lapse to a vague history of shared habits. The narrow fact is replaced with a broad debate, and responsibility dissolves. In a workplace, a manager may use this during feedback. An employee asks why their idea was dismissed. The manager replies, "We've been talking about alignment for months." Everyone has had ideas that didn't land. Remember John's proposal? The employee asked about one decision. The manager folds in unrelated cases. The point disappears into a broader pile. The employee leaves without a clear answer. Politicians use this often. A leader asked about mishandling funds replies, "Budgets are always questioned. Look at the last administration. Look at global inflation." One decision is replaced with talk of past leaders and outside forces. Precision drifts into vagueness, and accountability evaporates. Families use it too. A child asks why their sibling was allowed a later curfew. The parent replies, "We've been dealing with a lot. Remember last month when you didn't call home?" The present question about fairness collapses into stress and old mistakes. The immediate concern is buried. The tactic works because people want to be fair. When contexts blur, the listener feels pressure to broaden their view. If they keep insisting on the single point, they risk seeming petty. They second-guess themselves. The manipulator pounces on this. The collapse shifts the talk from clarity to balance. Friendships show the same pattern. A friend misses a meeting and says, "We've all been missing things. Remember Sarah skipping dinner? Remember when you canceled last year?" The present lapse is diluted by dragging in other people and times. Instead of one person being unreliable today, everyone seems unreliable over time. The tactic also blends issues of different weight. A partner confronted for lying says, "We all bend the truth. You didn't tell your boss you were leaving early." A major betrayal collapses into a small fib. Both sit in the same frame as if equal. The listener questions whether they are unfair, even though the acts are not comparable. In corporate reviews, the move appears when promotions are delayed. An employee asks for reasons. The supervisor says, "We're rethinking structure. Budgets are shifting. The team has had challenges." The clear question about one person's work is buried under economics and group effort. Nothing stands out, and clarity is gone. Negotiations show the same blur. A client raises a missed delivery. The vendor replies, "Deadlines are tricky. Everyone has delays. Remember when your team pushed things back?" Instead of owning the miss, they spread blame. The lapse is buried under the idea that delay is normal. The tactic works because memory is messy. When stories mix, the lines between them blur. By the end, you no longer know what belongs to yesterday, last year, or someone else. What was clear becomes blended, and that serves the one trying to escape. Sometimes it pairs with moral equivalence. Someone accused of harm says, "We've both done things we regret. Remember when you shouted? Remember when you forgot my birthday?" Serious harm is collapsed into smaller hurts. Both look equal inside the same frame. Accountability softens because the scale is hidden. It can also pair with future projection. Someone misses a deadline. Confronted, they say, "The real question is how we improve." Everyone needs to see the bigger picture. A present failure gets absorbed into a sweeping story about growth. The lapse disappears inside collective goals. Parents use it to defend habits. A child points out favoritism. The parent replies, "Everyone feels left out sometimes. This family has always had struggles." A narrow claim is dissolved into vague history. What might have been addressed gets lost in broad strokes. The tactic sounds reasonable because it looks like perspective. Who would argue against the whole picture? Yet fairness without clarity is not fairness. Blending separate conversations gives the impression of wisdom while erasing precision. The manipulator walks away clean because the question dissolves. You can spot it by watching for shifts. If you raise one issue and the reply drags in a different time, a different person, or a wider story, you are inside the tactic. The frame moves from specific to general, from present to past, from one actor to many. That shift is the signal. It thrives when people are tired. Long talks filled with mixed stories wear down patience. After minutes of blur, most give up. The manipulator counts on fatigue. The fog is not just mental, it is emotional. Tired minds let go of detail. In groups, the tactic grows sharper. One person raises a problem. Another collapses it into group dynamics. We've all had issues. Everyone shares blame. This is bigger than one person. Soon, no one isolates the original point. The group accepts a diluted story. The manipulator escapes untouched. Context collapse works because it turns clarity into fog. What began as one clear moment becomes a blended mix of times, people, and topics. In the fog, no one can point straight at the truth. That blur is the goal. Token generosity is the act of giving small favors or gestures, not out of kindness, but to build credit that can be cashed in later. On the surface, it looks harmless, even thoughtful. Someone brings you a coffee, holds a door, offers a ride, or covers a small cost. These things seem minor, and in ordinary life, they are part of the rhythm of human interaction. But when used strategically, they are not about kindness. They are about leverage. The giver is not giving to give. They are giving to get. The strength of this tactic lies in how humans are wired. Reciprocity runs deep. When someone does something for you, the natural instinct is to return the gesture. Even when the original act was small, the sense of debt can be strong. It sits in the mind like a mental note, shaping choices in ways we do not fully notice. Token generosity relies on this. The manipulator offers something small, waits, and then asks for something big. The small act becomes the seed of an imbalance. Picture a colleague at work. They bring you coffee a few times, print a document for you, or share their notes. These things are easy for them to do and cost little. Then, when a large task comes up, they say, "I've helped you a lot. Can you cover this project for me?" The ask is much heavier than the gifts, but it feels hard to say no. If you refuse, you risk looking ungrateful. If you agree, you are doing more than they ever did for you. That is the point. The early generosity was not random. It was an investment. In families, the the same pattern can appear. A parent gives small freedoms, extra screen time, lenient curfews, or money for snacks. Later, they use these gestures to demand obedience on larger matters. The child is reminded, "After everything I do for you, is this how you repay me?" The small tokens are stacked up as if they equal unquestioned loyalty. The generosity was not free. It carried hidden strings. In friendships, token generosity can blur the line between kindness and manipulation. A friend gives you rides, spots you a meal, or helps with errands. When they later need something large, money, housing, or covering for them in a serious way, they lean on the weight of all those small acts. The balance sheet they have built is presented like evidence. The subtle message is clear: you owe them. What began as generosity ends as a bill. Romantic relationships show this pattern in sharper relief. A partner showers the other with gestures, flowers, compliments, favors. Each one seems thoughtful. But over time, these tokens create a quiet debt. Later, the giver may ask for sacrifice, compromise, or forgiveness of serious harm. The earlier gifts are invoked as proof of devotion. "After all I've done for you, how can you not give me this?" The tokens transform into currency for leverage. In professional settings, token generosity often appears as strategic politeness. A manager offers praise, small perks, or symbolic recognition. Later, when demanding long hours or unpopular tasks, the earlier gestures are recalled. The team feels pressure to comply. The cost of those perks was not money, it was consent. The workers were softened, primed to say yes. The tactic is powerful because it feels unfair to resist. When someone gives, even a little, refusing them later feels wrong. To push back risks looking selfish or cold. This fear of appearing ungrateful holds people in place. The manipulator does not need to say much. The debt speaks for itself. The silence around reciprocity is often louder than words. One scenario shows the imbalance clearly. Imagine a neighbor who waters your plants when you are away. Later, they ask to borrow your car for a week. The gap between favors is enormous, but the request feels sticky because of the earlier act. Saying no sounds ungrateful, even though the scale of the exchange is absurd. This is how token generosity tilts the ground. The size of the ask can grow out of all proportion to the original gift, yet the pull of obligation remains. The tactic also appears in politics and sales. A politician gives small handouts, tax breaks, subsidies, or symbolic gifts. Later, they expect loyalty at the polls. A salesperson offers a free sample, then pressures for a purchase. In both cases, the small token is not an end, but a lure. The gift is bait to hook commitment. It costs little, but demands much in return. The danger of token generosity is not the gift itself, but the ledger it creates. In healthy exchange, gifts are given without demand. Kindness does not keep score. But in this tactic, scorekeeping is the point. The tokens accumulate like currency, waiting for the day they are cashed in. The generosity is not genuine, it is instrumental. The tactic works best when the tokens are visible but modest. They need to be just enough to register in memory, without enough weight to invite scrutiny. Too much generosity looks suspicious. Too little does not register. The sweet spot is the small but regular act. It builds a pattern of goodwill that later feels binding. A free coffee today, a ride tomorrow, later. All seeds for a future harvest. It also works because people fear being labeled ungrateful. Gratitude is a strong social norm. No one wants to be seen as the person who takes and never gives back. Manipulators exploit this fear. They position their tokens so refusal later looks like betrayal. By twisting gratitude into obligation, they convert generosity into power. Over time, the tactic breeds imbalance. One person gives small things but collects large returns. The other feels drained, unsure how the scale tipped so far. What felt like kindness turns into a quiet form of control. The ledger is always there, silent but heavy, shaping decisions. The one holding it decides when to call in the debt. The key to understanding token generosity is noticing the link between small acts and large asks. If a pattern emerges where generosity leads to pressure, the tokens were never free. They were down payments on compliance. Recognizing this breaks the spell. The coffee, the ride, the compliment, these do not equal lifelong debt. A small gift is just that. The manipulator wants you to forget scale, to feel guilty for questioning it. But clarity rests in remembering proportion. Presupposition insertion works by embedding assumptions into the structure of a question so the listener accepts them without realizing it. Instead of asking directly, the speaker frames the issue in a way that hides the answer inside the question. The person being addressed may argue about timing, options, or details, while overlooking the fact that they have already accepted the hidden premise. This tactic shapes thought by narrowing the range of possible responses. Consider the example. When you finally agree, will it be today or tomorrow? The question carries a built-in assumption that agreement is inevitable. The only choices offered are about when it happens. If the listener tries to answer directly, they are already conceding that they will agree. To resist, they must step outside the frame and challenge the hidden assumption. Most people do not notice the insertion in the moment. They focus on the surface of the question and treat the assumption as fact. In workplaces, managers may use this to secure compliance. Suppose a manager says, "Do you want to finish the report before lunch or later this afternoon?" The assumption is that the employee will finish the report today. The worker may choose a time without realizing they have already accepted the task as theirs. The question bypasses debate about whether the task is reasonable, fair, or even theirs to complete. The structure of the question guides them into agreement. Sales often relies on this tactic. A representative may ask, "Would you like to pay with cash or card?" The hidden assumption is that the customer has already decided to buy. By presenting the payment options first, the salesperson moves the buyer past the decision itself. Unless the customer pauses and reasserts that they have not agreed to purchase, they slip into the presupposed role of buyer. Many people comply because the question seems natural. In politics, presupposition insertion can shape public perception. A candidate may ask an opponent in debate, "When did you realize your plan would raise taxes on families?" The assumption built in is that the plan raises taxes. By forcing the opponent to respond, the assumption enters the conversation as if it were fact. Even if the opponent denies it, the audience has already heard the frame. The tactic places a false picture in the mind before it can be challenged. Personal relationships reveal smaller but frequent uses of this method. A partner might say, "Do you want to talk about what upset you now or after dinner?" The assumption is that the other partner is upset. They may not be, but the question pushes them into defending themselves instead of rejecting the frame. They may begin to search for reasons they might appear upset, making the assumption feel more valid than it is. Teachers sometimes use the method to direct behavior in classrooms. A teacher might ask, "Would you rather start your assignment quietly at your desk or at the back table?" The assumption is that the assignment will begin now. The student may choose a location, but forget they could have questioned the timing. The presupposition reduces resistance by offering limited options. The tactic is often used to manage groups where direct commands might provoke defiance. In law enforcement, interrogators use presupposition insertion in questioning. An officer may ask, "What time did you leave the building?" The assumption is that the person was inside. If the person answers with a time, they have confirmed presence. To resist, they must notice the hidden claim and reject it outright. Under pressure, many do not. Another version might be, "When you hid the item, did you use the drawer or the closet?" The structure forces the suspect into admitting hiding something while only choosing the location. Media interviews often feature the tactic as well. A journalist might ask, "How difficult was it to manage the failure of this program?" The assumption is that the program failed. The subject is drawn into discussing degrees of difficulty rather than disputing the failure itself. The audience absorbs the presupposition, even if the answer disputes it. Once an idea has been framed, it lingers. The strength of presupposition insertion comes from how our brains process language. People tend to accept the background of a question so they can focus on answering it. If someone asks, "Where did you park your car?" you assume they are right, that you have a car and that you drove. The question format makes those assumptions feel natural. When the tactic is applied strategically, it moves people past objections before they can raise them. Imagine a doctor speaking with a patient. "Would you like to schedule the surgery for this month or next?" The assumption is that surgery is necessary. The patient might focus on choosing a month instead of questioning whether surgery is the best option. The presupposition directs thought into a channel that benefits the speaker's goal. The only way to resist is to notice the insertion and challenge it, which requires alertness and confidence. Negotiations often rely on these subtle frames. One party may ask, "Do you want delivery early next week or later in the month?" The assumption is that the other party has already agreed to the deal. If they respond with a date, they move into compliance. Only by rejecting the frame, saying, "I haven't agreed to delivery at all," can they resist. The insertion saves the speaker from direct confrontation while advancing their position. This tactic also appears in parenting. A parent might say, "Do you want to brush your teeth before the story or after?" The assumption is that brushing will happen. The child chooses the order, not whether it happens. The presupposition reduces resistance because the child feels they have control while still accepting the premise. In friendships, the technique can mask manipulation. One friend might say, "Are you driving us today, or should I?" The assumption is that one of them must drive, and the friend has already agreed to go along. The real question of whether they want to join is skipped by answering. They accept the outing as settled. Advertising makes frequent use of presuppositions. Commercials might ask, "When you upgrade, will you choose the standard package or the premium one?" The assumption is that you will upgrade. The focus shifts to the type of package, not whether you need the service at all. This narrows consumer thought into choices favorable to the seller. Even casual conversation can hide these moves. A colleague might say, "What part of the meeting did you find most useful?" The assumption is that the meeting was useful. You may answer out of politeness, reinforcing the presupposition, even if you thought the meeting was a waste of time. The question guides you into treating usefulness as a given. Presupposition insertion functions as a shortcut for control. It frames reality before the listener has a chance to test it. By answering within the frame, the listener lends strength to the assumption. The tactic does not argue or persuade in the open. Instead, it reshapes the field of choices so that resistance requires more effort. Many people comply without noticing they have surrendered the larger point. The effectiveness of this method lies in subtlety. A direct statement like, "You will agree with me," invites challenge. A question like, "Will you agree today or tomorrow?" slips under defenses. The listener responds without realizing what has been smuggled in. It is not the surface words, but the structure that carries the power. Those who use it count on the fact that most people answer questions more quickly than they analyze them. In courts, politics, sales, relationships, classrooms, and casual talk, presupposition insertion shapes choices by narrowing them. It works not by arguing, but by embedding assumptions in the grammar of the question itself. The listener accepts more than they realize the moment they choose to answer. Premature forgiveness is a tactic that flips the natural order of conflict resolution. Normally, when harm is done, the person who caused it acknowledges their role, offers an apology, and then forgiveness may follow. That order matters because it creates accountability before release. But premature forgiveness inverts the process. The wronged person declares forgiveness before the other has admitted fault. At first, this may look generous or mature, but beneath it lies a subtle pressure. By forgiving without being asked, the forgiver creates an emotional debt. The other person is now placed in a position where they must apologize, even if they do not believe they were wrong, or else appear ungrateful and cruel. The strategy works because it disarms resistance. When someone says, "I forgive you," before you have admitted any wrongdoing, it knocks you off balance. You are suddenly framed as the guilty party, whether you agreed or not. The words suggest you have done something serious enough to need absolution, even if you do not see yourself as guilty. Refusing to accept that forgiveness risks painting you as stubborn or defensive. The manipulator uses forgiveness not as healing, but as leverage. They gain the moral high ground by looking merciful, while pushing you into the lower ground of guilt. Imagine a couple arguing. One partner raises a complaint about being ignored. The other listens briefly and then says, "I forgive you." The shift is confusing. The original issue is sidestepped and the blame flips. The partner who brought up the concern is suddenly cast as the offender. They now feel guilty for even speaking up. The forgiveness cuts short the discussion and leaves one person holding the weight of apology for something they never intended to own. This is how premature forgiveness moves the focus from resolution to control. In another case, think about a workplace dispute. An employee questions a manager's unfair decision. Instead of addressing the concern, the manager smiles and says, "Don't worry, I forgive you for speaking out of line." The employee is stunned. The focus is no longer on the questionable decision, but on their supposed misbehavior. The forgiveness reframes the challenge as an offense. If the employee resists, they appear insubordinate. If they accept, they admit guilt that was never theirs. The manager maintains power by weaponizing the language of grace. Families can also use this tactic. A parent may tell a child, "I forgive you for disappointing me," even before the child has spoken. The message is heavy. The child feels accused of a failure they may not have committed. If they push back, they risk being labeled ungrateful or rebellious. If they stay quiet, the unearned blame sits on them. The forgiveness removes any room for discussion. It silences the child and positions the parent as benevolent, even while tightening control. Religious or moral settings amplify the effect. Many traditions value forgiveness as a high virtue. To be forgiven is seen as a blessing, and to reject forgiveness risks appearing prideful or unworthy. When someone offers forgiveness before an apology, it drags these values into play. The target feels caught between admitting guilt they do not own or rejecting a gift that culture tells them should be cherished. In both choices, they lose. The manipulator knows this and uses forgiveness as a social trap. The tactic also thrives because people dislike being framed as ungrateful. When forgiveness is given, the polite response is to accept it. To question it risks making you look petty or combative. This social script binds the target. They are pulled into apologizing to restore balance, even if the balance was tilted by design. Premature forgiveness takes advantage of this discomfort. It forces compliance through the fear of looking cold-hearted. Consider a friend who says, "I forgive you for not being there for me lately," even if you were never asked for support in the first place. The words paint you as neglectful. If you argue, you risk deepening the conflict. If you accept, you concede a fault that may not exist. Either way, the forgiver defines the terms. They decide what was wrong, when it happened, and when it ends. Their forgiveness becomes the final word, and your role is reduced to either silent acceptance or guilty admission. The tactic gains further strength by appearing virtuous. Forgiveness is generally viewed as noble. Someone who forgives quickly is seen as generous, even saintly. This makes it difficult to call out manipulation when it hides inside the act. To criticize someone for forgiving too soon feels awkward, as if you are attacking kindness. The manipulator shields themselves behind the cultural weight of forgiveness, knowing few people will challenge it openly. At a psychological level, premature forgiveness exploits guilt and shame. It creates a sense of debt. Even if the target does not fully believe they were wrong, the forgiveness makes them feel like they are. The mismatch between their own view and the role assigned to them causes unease. That unease often drives them to apologize just to escape the discomfort. The manipulator does not need proof of harm. They only need to create the perception of it. Forgiveness then seals the frame, locking the target into guilt. The imbalance this creates is not small. Healthy forgiveness resolves conflict. Premature forgiveness preserves control. It interrupts honest dialogue, removes accountability from the forgiver, and heaps it on the other. The forgiven person carries the burden of guilt, while the forgiver enjoys the glow of moral superiority. The cycle can repeat until one person constantly apologizes for actions they never committed, while the other sustains power by appearing endlessly gracious. Over time, this corrodes trust. The target begins to feel wary, waiting for forgiveness to fall on them again. Conversations feel unsafe because even small disagreements can be reframed as offenses in need of pardon. The forgiver becomes untouchable, wrapped in an aura of virtue. The forgiven becomes trapped, never sure what they are guilty of, but always expected to make amends. This quiet erosion of balance leaves one person dominant and the other subdued. The key to seeing through premature forgiveness is noticing the order of events. If forgiveness comes before responsibility is claimed, it is not forgiveness at all. It is framing. The gift is false because it demands repayment. True forgiveness requires acknowledgement. It waits for an apology or at least an admission of harm before offering release. Anything else is not healing. It is pressure disguised as kindness. Strategic silence uses absence instead of words to gain control. The speaker withholds response and lets silence stretch until the other person feels the need to fill it. Most people dislike long pauses in conversation. They rush to speak, explain, or soften the tension. In that rush, they often reveal more than they planned or concede ground they meant to hold. The silence itself becomes the tactic. It works not by argument, but by discomfort. Imagine a salary negotiation. The employee states their case for a raise, and the manager stays quiet. Seconds feel longer than they are. The employee begins to worry they sounded too demanding. To ease the silence, they add, "Of course, I'd understand if the raise had to be smaller." The silence pulled out a concession without the manager saying anything. What could have been a firm request turns into compromise. The pause did the work. In police interrogations, silence is common. An officer asks a question, then waits. The suspect gives a short answer. The officer does not reply, does not move on, and does not break the quiet. The silence grows heavy. The suspect starts speaking again, filling the gap with extra detail, sometimes even contradicting themselves. The information comes not from clever phrasing, but from the pressure of holding a one-sided stillness. Strategic silence opens space the other person feels compelled to fill. Salespeople often use this tactic at closing. A buyer hears the final offer. The salesperson goes silent. The buyer shifts in their chair, feels the weight of the pause, and starts talking. They may justify why they hesitate, reveal budget limits, or even talk themselves into the purchase. The silence places the burden on them. By refusing to rush in with more persuasion, the salesperson lets discomfort do the pushing. In personal arguments, silence can change the shape of a conflict. One partner accuses the other of forgetting something important. The accused does not defend or explain right away. They remain quiet, looking at the other person. The accuser, unsettled, begins to soften. "I mean, it's not the end of the world. I just felt overlooked." The pause created space for the tone to shift. The accused never argued, but the silence forced the other to retreat from the intensity of their claim. Teachers sometimes use silence to guide classrooms. A teacher asks a question and lets the room sit. Students squirm, glance at each other, and finally one blurts out an answer. The silence worked better than calling on someone directly. By holding the pause, the teacher creates an atmosphere where students feel they must respond. The tool is not about intimidation, but about letting discomfort prompt participation. In boardrooms, silence plays out between executives. During a high-stakes discussion, one side presents numbers. The other side does not respond right away. They wait. The presenters, nervous, keep talking. They explain their data further, hedge their claims, and sometimes undercut their own position. The silence extracted more than questioning would have. It made the other side feel their work was insufficient until they over-explained. This tactic relies on a basic feature of human communication. People expect back-and-forth rhythm. When that rhythm breaks, tension builds. Silence is not neutral. It feels like judgment, disapproval, or disinterest. To escape that feeling, most people fill it with words. The longer the pause, the greater the urge to speak. Strategic silence manipulates that urge. It makes the other person take responsibility for ending the discomfort, often at their own expense. In courtrooms, lawyers sometimes ask a direct question, receive an answer, and then pause. The witness becomes uneasy and starts elaborating. Jurors hear more than was required, and sometimes damaging information surfaces. The lawyer gains by doing nothing. The silence draws out what would have remained hidden if the exchange had moved on. Parents may also use silence. A child explains why they broke a rule. The parent listens but does not reply. The child squirms, then adds, "Well, I also did this, but I didn't want to say it first." The pause coaxed out a fuller confession. The parent did not press or scold. The silence created the need to speak. In politics, silence after a loaded statement can work as a weapon. A candidate makes a claim. Opponents expect rebuttal, but the silence lingers instead. Journalists fill it by repeating or dissecting the claim, giving it more air. The one who stayed silent avoids error and lets others do the work of carrying the message. Strategic silence can also protect. In negotiations, a party may hear an unfair offer and remain silent. The silence signals disapproval without escalation. The other side, anxious, may revise their offer unprompted. Words might weaken the stance, but silence keeps pressure intact. Even in casual conversations, the tactic has force. A friend asks a loaded question. Instead of answering quickly, you pause. The quiet makes them backtrack. "I mean, you don't have to answer if it's too personal. Their retreat comes not from what you said, but from what you withheld. The method works because silence is rarely empty. It carries meaning, whether intended or not. It can suggest disappointment, disapproval, calculation, or power. The person left facing silence projects their own fears into it. They assume the other is thinking something critical. That projection drives them to fill the gap with talk, excuses, or concessions. In therapy, silence can help clients open up. A therapist asks a question and waits. The client resists at first, then continues. Unlike manipulation, this use of silence supports exploration. But the mechanics are the same. The pause creates pressure to speak. Whether gentle or strategic, silence relies on the discomfort of stillness. In business deals, silence is often used after price discussions. One side proposes a figure, the other stays quiet. Seconds stretch, then minutes. The proposer begins to doubt their own number. They lower the price or add terms before the silence is broken. The tactic extracts value without a word. During disciplinary meetings, silence can push employees into over-explaining. A supervisor states the concern, then goes quiet. The employee rushes to defend themselves, sometimes volunteering admissions that were not known. The silence pulled more out than questioning might have. Even in cross-cultural interactions, silence can shape outcomes. In some cultures, long pauses signal thoughtfulness. In others, they create deep unease. A skilled negotiator knows which environment they are in and uses silence accordingly. What feels respectful in one setting becomes pressure in another. The tactic bends to context, but always uses the pause as leverage. Strategic silence succeeds because it makes others uncomfortable while keeping the user calm. It shifts the burden of action. Words can be challenged, but silence cannot. It stands waiting until the other side breaks it. In breaking it, they often give more than they intended. The pause becomes a tool of persuasion, not through noise, but through absence. Implanted doubt is a technique that works by chipping away at certainty. Instead of direct confrontation or loud accusations, the manipulator slips in small questions that appear harmless on the surface. Each question aims not to discover truth, but to create hesitation. A person who once felt confident about what they saw, heard, or decided begins to second-guess themselves. Over time, the small seeds of doubt grow into larger insecurity. The process is slow and quiet, which makes it effective. It is not about shouting someone down, but about nudging them off balance, piece by piece. The strength of this tactic lies in its subtlety. If someone openly calls you wrong, you may defend yourself with clarity. But if they only raise a small question, you feel less sure. Are you sure you locked the door? Did you really say that? Or are you remembering wrong? Is that how it happened? These are not statements of fact, but prompts to question your own memory or judgment. Each one seems too minor to matter, but the pattern accumulates. The person being targeted begins to feel they cannot trust their own mind. The manipulator gains control not by force, but by undermining self-assurance. Consider a simple domestic example. A partner insists they already told you about a plan, though you are sure they never did. When you say so, they respond, "Really? You don't remember? That's odd." The words are not outright denial, but a soft push toward uncertainty. You begin to wonder if you didn't forget. The partner never needs to prove anything. They only need you to waver. Once you hesitate, they gain ground. If this happens often, you start to lose confidence in your memory. You may even begin to lean on them for confirmation. handing them quiet authority over your perception of events. In the workplace, implanted doubt can take a different shape. Imagine an employee who proposes an idea in a meeting. Afterward, a colleague says, "Are you sure that was your idea? I thought someone mentioned it earlier." The question carries no accusation, but it plants suspicion. Did they misremember? Did they take credit without realizing it? That single comment lingers. The employee may question themselves and hold back in future discussions. The colleague who planted the doubt gains influence by weakening another's confidence without needing to prove them wrong outright. Parents can also use this tactic, often without realizing the long-term effect. A child may recall an event clearly, but the parent responds, "Are you sure? That doesn't sound right." The child defends their memory, but the parent repeats the pattern often enough that the child begins to mistrust their own recall. As an adult, that child may struggle with confidence, always seeking external confirmation before trusting their own judgment. The doubt implanted early becomes a habit of self-questioning that follows them throughout life. The tactic thrives because human memory and perception are imperfect. Everyone forgets details, mixes events, or recalls things differently. The manipulator exploits this natural fallibility. By highlighting small slips, they make the target feel unreliable even when they are not. "I think you said something different earlier," or "Didn't you wear that last week?" sound casual, but point at flaws that may not exist. The more these small questions pile up, the more the person feels incapable of holding firm ground. Implanted doubt is not limited to memory. It can touch judgment, competence, or even self-worth. A teacher may ask a student, "Are you sure you understand this?" Not as genuine support, but as a way to undermine. The student may hesitate even if they grasp the concept. The hesitation then confirms the teacher's doubt, creating a loop. A friend may say, "Are you sure those people like you?" The words sound like concern, but they carry a hook. They force the listener to reevaluate relationships, often through a lens of insecurity. The manipulator never has to claim truth. The power lies in making the other person question themselves. This strategy is effective because humans crave certainty. When certainty is shaken, discomfort grows. The easiest way to relieve that discomfort is to lean on someone else's version of events. The manipulator offers themselves as that anchor, but only after they have eroded the target's trust in their own mind. Over time, the target stops asking, "Am I right?" and instead asks, "What do you think?" The shift looks small, but marks a deep transfer of control. Gaslighting is the extreme form of implanted doubt, where entire realities are denied or rewritten. But implanted doubt does not need to go that far. It works best in the gray areas. If you cannot prove every detail of your memory or judgment, the seed takes root. The manipulator does not need you to collapse fully. They only need you to pause, to hesitate, to defer. That hesitation can shape choices, silence objections, and lower resistance. For example, in negotiations, one side may say, "Are you sure you want those terms? I think most people go with something else." The suggestion is not proof, but enough to make the other side question their stance. In personal conflict, a partner may say, "I don't think you really mean that," when you express frustration. The words cast doubt on your own feelings, as if you cannot even trust yourself. Each moment weakens your ground. The manipulator stands firmer not because they are right, but because they have made you less sure. The emotional impact of implanted doubt can be lasting. People exposed to it often describe feeling foggy or uncertain, even outside the relationship. Their confidence in memory, judgment, or self-worth erodes until they question decisions constantly. The manipulator may not even need to push anymore. The habit of doubt becomes internalized. The target carries it with them, second-guessing everything they do, long after the manipulator has spoken. The tactic is difficult to resist because it wears the mask of curiosity or care. A question like, "Are you sure?" is common in everyday talk. But when used consistently and strategically, it turns into a tool of control. The danger is not in a single question, but in the pattern. Recognizing that pattern is the first step to breaking it. The manipulator wants you to see uncertainty everywhere. By naming the tactic, you restore some of the certainty they are trying to take. Gradual normalization is the slow shift of what a group sees as acceptable. It rarely begins with a bold demand. It starts with a small step that fits inside current norms. Then another step follows, and another, until the final position, once seen as extreme, now looks routine. Each move feels minor, but the path matters more than any single step. By the time people look back, the landscape has changed. You see this in workplaces. A manager introduces a tracking tool to help with planning. At first, it records only project milestones. No one objects. Later, it logs start and end times to improve staffing. People shrug. Then it records keystrokes to ensure compliance. Some feel uneasy, but resisting now feels late and out of step. What began as planning became surveillance through a chain of small upgrades. The final state would have been rejected on day one, but it did not arrive on day one. Politics follows the same arc. A leader floats a narrow, temporary policy. It passes because it looks limited. Once people adjust, the scope expands. Coverage shifts from shock to routine. Each amendment moves the boundary until what was once extraordinary blends into the background. Normalization turns signal into noise. Media accelerates this. The first time an idea airs, it looks outrageous. The fifth time, it sparks debate. By the 20th, it is just another segment. Viewers who once flinched watch without concern. Psychology calls this desensitization. Repeated exposure dulls response. The tactic works by lowering resistance through familiarity. Business uses it in pricing. A company adds a processing fee. Months later, a service fee. Then, a convenience fee. Each feels small. The sticker price looks stable, but the checkout total climbs. Customers grumble, then adjust. After enough cycles, the higher cost feels standard. Language often shifts first. A harsh practice gets a softer label. A risky chemical becomes a performance additive. A pay cut becomes realignment. Once the label sticks, the practice feels less threatening. People argue over words instead of substance, giving the change time to take root. Online platforms illustrate the pattern. Rules adjust so certain extreme content stays up if it adds context. Later, if it is newsworthy. Later still, if it sits behind a click-through. Each change looks like nuance. The feed surfaces more of that content, and users grow used to seeing it. Reports turn into likes. The boundary moved, one revision at a time. Social proof reinforces the drift. At first, only a fringe adopts the new line. Then, respected figures nod to it. Then, polls show growing support. Each stage signals that resistance is fading. People often adjust less to the idea itself than to the sense that others already accept it. Families experience the same slide. A parent bans screens at dinner. One night, an exception is made for a special game. Later, highlights play. Soon, full shows run. No one ever voted to change the rule. A string of exceptions rewrote it. Reversal now meets protests. But we always do this. Marketing names it foot in the door. First comes a pledge, then a small donation, then a larger one. Each yes builds pressure for the next. People comply to stay consistent with themselves. A large request feels reasonable once preceded by smaller ones. Compliance cultures show shifting baselines. Standards on day one feel strict. Over time, lapses go unpunished. The new normal slips below the handbook. Outsiders may be shocked at a breach. Insiders are not. They have been living inside the shift. Scandals often form this way, not through one reckless sweep, but a slow slide. Cities reshape space with the same tool. Temporary barriers go up. Months later, they remain. Signs and patrols expand. Residents forget where open space once began. Visitors accept the current map as normal. Reopening now requires justification. What began as temporary now looks permanent. Entertainment shifts taste through exposure. A show runs edgy jokes in late hours. Ratings grow. Similar jokes appear earlier. Complaints fade. The next season pushes further. Norms adapt not just to the content, but to changed expectations at home. What once marked a line becomes routine. The steps follow a rhythm. Start with a mild claim. Pair it with a sympathetic story. Repeat it in narrow contexts. Present it in balanced debates until the question shifts from whether to how. Wrap each step in reasonable language. Time dulls memory of the old baseline. The chain looks like process, not manipulation. Relationships show this too. A partner mocks you once in public and calls it a joke. You object. They dismiss you as sensitive. Next time, the joke sharpens. You stop objecting to avoid conflict. Soon, the group expects it. Resistance later draws, but this is how we always tease. Each delay raised the price of reversal. Education illustrates it as well. A teacher eases deadlines to reduce stress. Next term, grading loosens to support rhythms. An assignment drops to focus on core skills. Each change looks kind. Over time, demands shrink. When scores fall, the new level feels normal. Recovery proves harder than early defense. Security policy often slides. Cameras go up for safety. Later, badges for access. Then, GPS for asset protection. No single step sounds harsh. Together, they map behavior and movement. On day one, the full system would have drawn protest. Introduced gradually, it becomes ordinary. The tactic works because people conserve effort. Challenging every change is costly. Each small step seems not worth the fight. People tell themselves they will act later. By the time it feels urgent, the path is paved. They also prefer coherence. After early concessions, beliefs adjust to fit them. Anchors, framing, and exposure guide the drift. Public discourse aids the slide with balance. Placing extremes beside moderates grants them equal stage time. Frequency creates legitimacy. Audiences adjust, not because the argument is strong, but because the issue becomes familiar. Organizations cement the tactic with pilots and sunset clauses that never sunset. A pilot builds evidence, then expands. Reports frame continuity as proof of value. Staff, tied to the program, push for survival. What began as trial grows roots while still called temporary. Algorithms speed the process online. Extreme claims drive engagement. Feeds amplify them. Users see them often and treat them as common. Communities form around repetition. Newcomers adopt the local norm quickly. What once shocked now passes without notice. Gradual normalization does not need force. It works through repetition, framing, and small adjustments. It spreads the cost of change across time, so no single step feels worth resisting. By the time people notice how far they have drifted, the return path looks steep. Semantic traps work by shifting the meaning of words after a conversation has already begun. At first, everyone seems to agree on what a term means. Both sides talk as though they share the same definition, but at some point, the manipulator changes how the word is used. The target may not notice right away because the shift is often small and wrapped in casual phrasing. Once the new definition takes hold, the manipulator can claim victory in the discussion, not because they proved their point, but because they changed the ground rules midstream. This tactic is less about evidence and more about language control. Consider a workplace example. A manager tells the team they value flexibility. At first, flexibility is understood to mean the freedom to adjust schedules or adapt methods to meet goals. The team agrees. Later, when employees ask for flexible hours, the manager responds, "That's not what flexibility means. Flexibility means staying late when the project demands it." The same word is being used, but the meaning has shifted. The staff thought it was about freedom. The manager redefined it as obligation. Because the word itself remained in play, the employees feel trapped. They agreed to flexibility, but the definition changed after their agreement. This tactic is effective because people rely on shared meaning to communicate. When a word is redefined in the middle of an exchange, it forces the listener into a bind. To push back, they must interrupt and challenge the meaning itself, which can make them appear argumentative or pedantic. Most people avoid such conflict because it feels like quibbling. The manipulator counts on this reluctance. They know that if they can control the definition, they can control the outcome of the conversation. Another example occurs in political debates. A speaker might use the word freedom to rally support. At the start, listeners interpret freedom as personal liberty, the ability to make choices without interference. Later in the discussion, the speaker redefines freedom as the absence of certain opposing viewpoints or as strict adherence to a set of rules. The crowd may not catch the subtle shift, but the speaker has redirected the conversation. The original agreement, support for freedom, becomes support for something else entirely. Listeners who resist may be accused of rejecting freedom itself, when in fact they are rejecting the new definition. Semantic traps often thrive in close relationships as well. Imagine one partner telling the other, "I want honesty between us." The other agrees, believing honesty means openness about feelings and actions. Later, the first partner uses honesty to demand every detail of past relationships or private thoughts that have nothing to do with the present. If the other person resists, they are told, "I thought you valued honesty." The word becomes a weapon because its meaning was twisted. What started as mutual agreement becomes leverage to extract more than was ever intended. The tactic relies on the natural trust people place in language. When someone says a word, we assume we know what it means. We rarely pause to define it formally. That trust creates vulnerability. The manipulator waits until the conversation is invested in the term and then shifts its meaning. By then, the listener has already committed to the word. To resist feels like breaking their own promise. The manipulator exploits this psychological discomfort, creating pressure to comply. One of the clearest ways to see this tactic is in arguments over fairness. Two people may agree that a decision should be fair. At first, fair might mean equal treatment. Later, one side redefines fair as proportional treatment based on effort or contribution. Suddenly, the same word supports the opposite outcome. The person who thought fair meant equal loses ground because they already agreed to the word. To resist now requires challenging not just the outcome, but the very meaning of fairness. The manipulator can then accuse them of rejecting fairness altogether. Semantic traps are powerful because they do not attack facts directly. They sidestep facts by changing the framework through which facts are judged. If the ground rules of meaning can be altered, evidence becomes irrelevant. The manipulator does not need to prove that staying late is flexible, or that silence is freedom, or that prying is honesty. They only need to assert that the word now includes those things. Once the definition is accepted, the argument is already won. In business negotiations, this tactic can be costly. One side may agree that a contract should allow for reasonable expenses. Later, when disputes arise, the other side claims reasonable includes a much broader set of charges than expected. Because the term was never clearly defined, it becomes a semantic battlefield. The manipulator uses the ambiguity to their advantage, insisting that their broader definition is the true one. The other side struggles to object without looking like they are backing out of an agreement. Children sometimes face this tactic from adults. A parent might tell a child they must respect the rules. The child agrees, believing respect means following household guidelines. Later, the parent insists that respect also means not questioning decisions or not showing frustration. The child is trapped by the shifting definition. If they argue, they are labeled disrespectful. The parent does not need to justify their authority. They only need to redefine the term to keep control. Semantic traps often operate alongside other manipulative strategies. They can be paired with false equivalence, where the new definition is tied to unrelated concepts, or with implanted doubt, where the target is made to feel unsure about their own understanding of the word. In combination, these tactics create a fog where the target struggles to hold on to meaning. In that fog, the manipulator takes control. The best way to see this tactic in action is to notice the pivot point. At the start of a conversation, the word carries one sense. Later, it carries another. The shift often happens quietly, hidden in repetition. You said you believed in loyalty. Yes. Then you should support me even when I'm wrong, because that's what loyalty means. The listener may not stop to challenge the new meaning because they already agreed to the word. By the time they realize, the manipulator has already tied them to the redefined term. Semantic traps reveal the power of language in shaping thought. A word is not only a label, but also a container for assumptions, values, and obligations. When that container is swapped mid-conversation, the entire exchange tilts. The manipulator walks away with the appearance of agreement, while the target feels uneasy but unsure how to resist. The tactic depends on that hesitation, on the social pressure to avoid appearing argumentative about definitions. By exploiting that pressure, the manipulator secures control through language itself. Reputation seeding is the practice of planting small, casual remarks to guide how others see you. It is not direct boasting or open self-promotion. It works through suggestion. The manipulator slips hints, stories, or side comments into conversations that build an image over time. They do not claim the image outright, but let others draw the conclusion. The trick lies in making the seeds look unplanned, like natural parts of dialogue, so the listener feels they discovered the impression on their own. Take a person in an office who wants to be seen as reliable under pressure. Instead of declaring, "I am the most dependable person here," they might mention during lunch, "Last night I was up late because the server crashed, but it's back online now." It sounds like a detail of daily life, but the seed is planted. This person handles crises. If they repeat variations of this comment, colleagues begin to think of them as dependable, even without first-hand proof. The method works because people prefer impressions they believe they formed themselves. Open bragging often triggers resistance. Subtle cues, however, let listeners feel ownership of the conclusion. "I've noticed she's always working late," or "he seems to know a lot about emergencies." The manipulator creates conditions for these observations without forcing them. Over time, the seeds grow into reputation. It extends beyond workplaces. In social groups, a person might remark, "I don't drink much anymore. Too many late nights when I was running events." They are not asking for recognition, but the detail suggests experience, connections, and discipline. Listeners fill in the blanks. This person has lived a life worth noting. The vagueness is powerful because it leaves room for imagination. A small comment opens space for others to invent the larger story. Reputation seeding often blends truth with performance. A student who wants to appear dedicated may say, "I had to skip a show this weekend because I needed to finish the lab report." The listener hears sacrifice and diligence. The fact may be real, but the choice to highlight it is deliberate. The manipulator shapes their image by selecting which details to share and which to omit. In competitive environments, reputation can carry as much weight as performance. Managers or peers cannot observe every detail, so impressions fill gaps. If someone has subtly seeded an image of leadership, they may receive opportunities first. During a meeting, they might say, "When I was coordinating the rollout, I had to make a quick decision that saved us a week." The phrasing is modest, but the seed is strong. The listener links them with leadership and problem solving, even if their role was minor. Seeding can also work in reverse. A manipulator may undermine rivals with comments disguised as compliments. "I admire how quickly she finishes work. I could never move that fast." It sounds harmless, but it plants doubt about thoroughness. Listeners begin to suspect corners are being cut, even without evidence. This destructive version chips away at another's image instead of building one's own. Humor often masks the tactic. A person might joke, "I'm always the one people call when they're in trouble." Said lightly, it avoids the stigma of self-praise, but still conveys reliability. Because it comes across as playful, it slides past resistance. Later, when the same person is chosen to solve a problem, the reputation feels earned. Reputation seeding depends on repetition. A single remark may fade, but a series of hints creates a pattern. Different late-night stories or mentions of being called on for help begin to add up. The manipulator plants seeds in varied contexts: meetings, casual chats, even social media. The aim is slow accumulation, not instant persuasion. The tactic thrives because people rarely challenge casual remarks. A statement like, "I barely slept last night because I had to finish reviewing reports," is usually taken at face value. Listeners seldom ask whether the reports were urgent or even real. The lack of scrutiny allows the manipulator to shape their image with little risk. By controlling what enters the conversation, they control the narrative. In a volunteer group, for example, someone who wants to be seen as indispensable may say, "I couldn't make dinner with friends because I had to set up the fundraiser tables." Later, they add, "I was on the phone with donors until late." None of the remarks is dramatic, but together they paint a picture of dedication. Others begin to view them as essential. So when leadership roles open, the reputation has already paved the way. Friendships also provide fertile ground. A person who wants to be seen as worldly might casually say, "When I was in Morocco, I noticed people had a different rhythm to the day." The detail may not fit the topic, but it seeds the idea of broad experience. Over time, the listener associates them with sophistication. The speaker never brags, yet the reputation forms piece by piece. The subtlety makes reputation seeding hard to confront. If someone points it out, they risk sounding paranoid. Telling a colleague, "You're always talking about staying late to look good," seems defensive. The manipulator can deny intent with, "I was just making conversation." Because each seed is small, the pattern hides in plain sight, protected by plausible deniability. This strategy works best in groups where impressions matter more than facts. In workplaces, classrooms, or social circles, people cannot check every story. They rely on remarks to fill gaps. The manipulator knows most will not verify whether they truly stayed late, led the project, or sacrificed their weekend. The story alone shapes the perception. Over time, the tactic creates an image that feels natural. People may not recall the first remark, but carry the impression. This person is reliable, experienced, or disciplined. The manipulator reaches their goal by scattering small seeds until a reputation takes root without ever making a direct claim. Reverse victimhood is when an aggressor presents themselves as the injured party. It shifts focus from their actions to their supposed suffering. By doing this, they blunt criticism, gain sympathy, and sometimes even force others to defend them. The tactic thrives in conflict because it confuses responsibility. When used with skill, it can turn a clear situation upside down, leaving bystanders unsure who is wrong. The aggressor not only avoids blame, but often secures a moral advantage they do not deserve. One way to see reverse victimhood is in personal relationships. Imagine a partner who makes cutting remarks. When confronted, they insist they're the ones being mistreated. They might say, "You always attack me for no reason," or "Why are you so harsh with me?" The person who delivered the insult now claims to be under attack. The partner who tried to address the behavior ends up feeling guilty. What began as a defense against cruelty becomes an apology to the person who caused the harm. The same pattern appears in workplaces. A manager berates employees during meetings, then tells leadership that staff undermine them. They present themselves as the one facing disrespect, even though they set the hostile tone. If employees file complaints, the manager doubles down and claims unfair treatment. The system, which should protect workers, gets tangled in contradictory accounts. Without clear records, the one in authority often wins sympathy by playing the victim. History shows the tactic on a larger scale. Governments have used it to justify crackdowns. A state might say it is under attack by dissenters when those dissenters are unarmed and protesting peacefully. By framing itself as the victim, the government casts harsh responses as defensive rather than oppressive. Citizens who might object are told their safety requires decisive action. Victimhood language hides aggression under claims of self-defense. In everyday disputes, reverse victimhood works because it taps into empathy. Most people want to avoid hurting others. When someone insists they are suffering, listeners hesitate before challenging them, even if the claim makes little sense. The risk of appearing cruel silences opposition. Aggressors exploit this reflex. By exaggerating their pain, they shift the burden of proof onto the real victim, who must now explain both the original harm and why they are not guilty of causing new harm. Consider a school setting. A student bullies a classmate. When teachers intervene, the bully insists they are the one being picked on. "They started it," or "everyone is against me," becomes their shield. Teachers, lacking time to sort details, often tell both students to make peace. The bully escapes consequence while the real target feels unsafe and unheard. Over time, the aggressor builds a reputation as someone unfairly treated, while their victims fall silent. Online communities make the pattern clear. A user spreads hostile comments or misinformation. When moderators step in, the user cries censorship. They claim their rights were violated, even though they poisoned discussion. This portrayal as a victim of silencing can rally supporters. Instead of addressing the harm, debate shifts to free speech and fairness. The aggressor gains ground, not by defending their actions, but by recasting themselves as wronged. In politics, reverse victimhood often appears in culture wars. A figure insults a group, then insists they are persecuted when criticized. They shift focus from their remarks to the intolerance of those who object. Accountability is framed as aggression. Criticism becomes proof of their suffering. Their supporters see them as embattled rather than as instigators. Each cycle repeats as attempts at accountability feed the narrative of oppression. The tactic works because it creates false symmetry. Listeners hear two competing claims of harm. Without clarity, they may split the difference, assuming both sides share blame. This framing benefits the aggressor. Equalizing responsibility erases the imbalance of power and sequence of events. Aggression becomes a matter of perspective rather than fact. Once the fight looks like two opinions, the aggressor's version survives unchallenged. Families show another layer. A parent lashes out at a child, then insists the child provoked them. They claim their anger was a reaction to disrespect. The child, confused and powerless, begins to doubt their memory. Over time, they may accept blame for the parent's outbursts. The aggressor continues unchecked, sustained by their ability to recast abuse as defense. The psychological effect on true victims is heavy. Faced with an aggressor who insists on their own victimhood, targets often question themselves. They feel guilt for causing distress that never existed. Many withdraw complaints to avoid appearing heartless. This self-doubt prevents resistance and keeps the cycle alive. The tactic does not just win arguments, it corrodes confidence and silences opposition. Reverse victimhood often pairs with other manipulations. It works well with presupposition insertion, where questions carry assumptions. "When will you stop attacking me?" presumes an attack exists. It also pairs with strategic silence, where the aggressor withholds response until others fill the gap with apologies. By layering methods, aggressors reinforce their false position. Each tactic amplifies the others, making the narrative harder to untangle. Public relations campaigns sometimes use the same stance. A company polluting a river may claim unfair pressure from anti-business activists. The company that caused harm now casts itself as the victim of harassment. Media outlets seeking balance give airtime to both sides. The pollution receives less focus than the supposed persecution of the company. Over time, the aggressor gains sympathy as a misunderstood target. Sports rivalries provide simple illustrations. A player known for rough tactics complains of being singled out when referees penalize them. They present themselves as unfairly targeted despite initiating fouls. Fans echo the claim, and soon the aggressor is framed as a martyr to biased officials. This flips responsibility and muddies judgment in the heat of competition. What makes reverse victimhood powerful is its appeal to fairness. People dislike seeing anyone mistreated. The aggressor hijacks that instinct. They present criticism as cruelty, oversight as harassment, or consequence as persecution. The real victim's account competes with an inverted narrative, and audiences rarely hold both at once. Sympathy flows to the loudest or most persistent claimant. Repeat use shapes perception further. A habitual aggressor who always claims injury may convince others they are simply unlucky or misunderstood. Listeners stop questioning whether the pattern itself is evidence. They accept the story of constant persecution as truth. This normalizes aggression under the cover of victimhood. What began as a tactic hardens into identity. The tactic also adapts to cultural narratives. In societies that prize resilience, aggressors may claim they are attacked for speaking truth. In societies that prize harmony, they may present themselves as targets of hostility that threatens peace. By shaping claims to local values, they secure stronger footing. The strategy relies less on facts than framing. It thrives wherever people care about justice and can be persuaded that justice has been denied. Reverse victimhood is not simple denial. It is an active strategy. It reframes aggression as defense and criticism as attack. It manipulates empathy, clowns responsibility, and reshapes narratives. It allows aggressors to harm without being held accountable and to demand care while offering none. With constant use, it can wear down resistance and rewrite conflicts in its favor. Emotional calibration is a subtle method of influence. It works by adjusting one's tone, pace, or emotional intensity until the other person begins to mirror it. People naturally adapt to the emotions of those around them. A calm voice can settle a heated room. A raised tone can make others tense or defensive. The manipulator uses this tendency not to soothe or connect, but to control the rhythm of the interaction. Instead of pushing with direct arguments, they guide with shifts in how they speak or react, pulling the other person into a pattern that suits their purpose. Imagine a negotiation. One party begins brisk and slightly impatient, talking quickly. The other starts slower, unsure. Over a few minutes, the faster speaker deliberately slows their pace, lowers their voice, and softens their tone. The slower speaker, almost without thinking, adjusts as well. The two align in rhythm, and now the faster speaker controls the range of acceptable emotion. By being the one who calibrates first, they set the frame. It is not about the words alone. It is about the emotional setting in which the words land. This technique takes advantage of mirroring, a well-documented social habit. Humans unconsciously copy gestures, speech patterns, and emotional states to build rapport. When used innocently, it can create trust. Two friends may start using the same phrases or laugh in a similar rhythm, strengthening their bond. Emotional calibration twists this natural mirroring into a tool of manipulation. Instead of letting alignment happen organically, the manipulator tests reactions, adjusts their tone, and watches until the target locks into their emotional rhythm. Once that happens, persuasion becomes easier because the target feels synchronized, as if they share common ground. Consider an argument between partners. One begins with frustration, raising their voice. The other answers softly, keeping their tone measured. If the soft speaker slowly raises their energy, adding slight urgency but not full anger, the angry partner often shifts down a notch, meeting them halfway. The manipulator knows that by pacing the other's emotion, they can then lead it. It is a step-by-step method. First match, then guide. By the time the angry partner realizes the shift, they may already feel calmer, but also more receptive to the manipulator's framing of the conflict. Workplace dynamics reveal this in subtle ways. A manager might meet with a team member who is anxious about performance. Instead of addressing the concern directly, the manager starts calm and understanding, then moves toward a brisk, confident tone. The anxious employee, relieved at the calm start, follows the rising pace without resistance. Soon they feel carried by the manager's energy. They might agree to take on more work or accept stricter deadlines because the emotional frame shifted from fear to reassurance to momentum. The employee thinks the change came from themselves, not realizing they were guided by the manager's calibration. Sales interactions show the tactic as well. A customer may hesitate, voice full of doubt. The salesperson mirrors the doubt at first, matching the slower pace, then gradually infuses warmth and certainty. The customer unconsciously aligns, and their hesitation softens. They begin nodding, repeating back words of assurance. The sale closes not because of the facts, but because of the emotional synchronization. It feels like trust, but it is crafted alignment. This method is not always aggressive. Sometimes it works through silence. A manipulator may pause longer than usual after being challenged. The silence creates tension. The target, uncomfortable, begins filling the gap, often softening their stance or revealing more than intended. The manipulator calibrated the pace not by speaking, but by withholding speech, knowing the other would adjust to the slower rhythm. Silence, tone, laughter, sighs, all can be used as levers when employed with intention. The danger lies in how invisible it is. Unlike open persuasion, where one can argue back, emotional calibration operates beneath awareness. People sense comfort or discomfort without identifying the cause. They may leave a conversation thinking they reached a decision freely, when in fact their emotional state was carefully guided. A friend who wanted you to agree to a plan might have matched your hesitation, then added a touch of excitement, until you felt that excitement as your own. Later, you think, "I guess I really wanted to do it," not realizing you had been led. The tactic works best in one-on-one settings where attention is close. In group conversations, calibration is harder, as different members may hold different emotional states. But even there, a skilled manipulator can aim their adjustments at the person they most need to influence. In a team meeting, for example, they may direct their tone toward the decision maker, ignoring others. As long as the key figure begins to mirror them, the outcome leans their way. Others in the room may notice the shift, but find it difficult to intervene without sounding disruptive. Calibration can also slide into manipulation during conflicts. Suppose someone owes you money. You confront them firmly. They begin by showing mild shame, speaking slowly and softly, making you mirror their pace. As the conversation continues, they inject humor, then warmth, shifting the tone until you feel awkward pressing harder. By the end, you might accept a weaker promise of repayment, thinking you reached the decision fairly. In reality, your tone was pulled away from firmness into sympathy, guided step by step by their calibration. In friendships, calibration may appear as emotional dependency. A manipulator who feels threatened by your independence might start every call with heavy sadness. You match their energy out of empathy. Over time, they shift to light relief when you comfort them. The cycle repeats until you associate your presence with their improvement. You become invested, but not freely. It was seeded by their adjustment of tone, first pulling you down, then letting you feel like the rescuer. The bond tightens not by chance, but by design. Awareness is the first defense against emotional calibration. If you notice your mood shifting quickly during a conversation, ask yourself whether the change reflects your own reasoning or whether you are matching someone else's rhythm. A sudden calm or a sudden urgency may feel natural, but may also be a sign of subtle influence. Pausing to step outside the interaction can break the chain. If you slow your responses or vary your tone deliberately, you interrupt the manipulator's calibration cycle. Unlike overt persuasion, this technique leaves little trace. People remember what was said, but not how the tone guided them. Yet tone and pace often shape the outcome more than facts. A manipulator who understands this can achieve compliance without sounding demanding. They can cede agreement without giving orders. They can even create guilt or relief without spelling out accusations or comfort. Emotional calibration is about shaping the field of play, not just the moves on it. The power of this method lies in its invisibility. It does not demand, argue, or insist. It flows. The manipulator adapts first, then leads. They guide without appearing to guide. The target mirrors, thinking they are aligning out of choice. not realizing they are being tuned like an instrument. Step by step, tone by tone, pace by pace, the manipulator turns natural empathy into quiet control. The exclusivity illusion works by convincing someone that what they are told, shown, or given access to is not available to anyone else. It exploits a simple human weakness. People value things more when they think they are scarce. The sense of being trusted with something only for you creates an emotional hook that can override judgment. It builds a feeling of privilege and recognition. Once someone believes they are in a select circle, they often lower their guard, stop asking questions, and even feel pressure to prove they were worthy of being chosen. This tactic has been used in relationships, business, politics, marketing, and cult recruitment, always playing on the same vulnerability. A personal example makes this clear. A friend leans in and says, "I shouldn't be telling you this, but I trust you." In that moment, you feel chosen. The implication is that you are closer to them than others, honored with knowledge not meant for wide ears. Even if what follows is gossip or a half-truth, the delivery makes it feel important. Because it seems privileged, you are less likely to check if it is accurate. You might even pass it on, saying, "Don't tell anyone I told you." The illusion multiplies as it spreads. In workplaces, the same trick shows up as confidential-sounding statements. A manager might tell an employee, "You're the only one I'm trusting with this." The employee feels elevated, which ties them to the manager. Yet the same line may be used with several employees. Each believes they are uniquely trusted, which prevents them from comparing notes. By scattering the illusion, the manager builds loyalty and reduces collective resistance. When decisions are later questioned, those who felt special are less likely to challenge the authority that confided in them. Sales tactics thrive on this principle. A salesperson may tell a potential buyer, "I don't usually share this deal, but I'll make an exception for you." By framing the offer as rare, they raise its value without changing the terms. The buyer, eager not to lose this privilege, rushes to close. Scarcity mixed with exclusivity turns ordinary offers into urgent decisions. Cults and high-control groups weaponize the approach. Recruits are often given information in stages, each layer framed as reserved for the initiated. Early teachings are simple and welcoming. Later, doctrines grow stranger or harsher. Each step is presented as entry into a deeper circle. The recruit feels honored, even as demands escalate. They may be told that others are not ready, but they are special enough to handle the truth. This staged revelation locks them in. To question the content would be to admit they were not worthy of the exclusivity. By the time they see through the illusion, their identity is tied to the group. In relationships, exclusivity often appears as selective vulnerability. A partner may share a hardship, framed as something they have never told anyone else. This draws the listener closer. The story may be true, exaggerated, or fabricated, but the framing makes it effective. The partner now feels a duty of care, thinking they alone were trusted with fragile truth. This bond is hard to break, even if the relationship turns harmful. The manipulator can maintain control by reminding the other person, "You're the only one who knows the real me." Political figures use the same strategy. A leader might declare, "You are the only people who understand what I am fighting for." The claim divides the public into insiders and outsiders. Supporters feel superior, chosen to carry a special torch. Outsiders become enemies. This tactic fuels loyalty, not because of policies, but because people want to preserve the feeling of exclusivity. Politics turns from public service into a private bond, shielding the leader from criticism. Online communities show another form. Content creators may tell followers, "This advice is only for my most dedicated audience." They may use gated groups, private chats, or subscription tiers to reinforce special access. While charging for content is normal, the manipulative edge appears when the content is ordinary but dressed as secret knowledge. People pay not for what they receive, but for the feeling of being inside the circle. The tactic works because it blurs the line between trust and manipulation. Trust is built on selective disclosure, but the exclusivity illusion exaggerates it. It presents common or fabricated information as secret, triggering an emotional response. The listener hesitates to verify or share doubts, fearing it would break the bond. That isolation strengthens the manipulator's control. A negotiation scenario highlights the effect. Suppose two companies discuss a merger. One side says, "We're giving you information about our future plans that no one else has." The other side feels privileged, believing they hold an advantage. Yet the same secret may have been shared with competitors to create pressure. The illusion makes each target feel singled out, leading them to overcommit or accept bad terms. Pyramid schemes rely on the same play. Recruits are told they are lucky to be invited because not everyone is given this chance. They are urged to stay quiet because it is too powerful for outsiders to understand. This mix of secrecy and flattery makes people ignore red flags. By the time the illusion breaks, they may have lost money and reputation, all because they believe they were chosen. Children are especially vulnerable. A child might be told, "This is our little secret." The phrase creates exclusivity, often to hide abuse or wrongdoing. Because children crave special bonds with trusted adults, the illusion silences them. It shows how dangerous exclusivity becomes when paired with authority and secrecy. What makes the illusion durable is its tie to identity. Once someone accepts they are special, they work to protect that image. They may defend the manipulator, saying, "You don't know them like I do." They may resist warnings, believing their relationship is different. This defense comes not from facts, but from the need to preserve the sense of exclusivity. The manipulator no longer has to push. The target maintains the illusion for them. The illusion does not require skill. Simple phrases trigger it. "Just between us, you're the only one I'd tell this to. I shouldn't say this, but I will. Because it's you." These lines appear in everyday speech. Most of the time, they are harmless, but with intent, they create imbalance. They make the listener more compliant, less skeptical, and more emotionally invested. Repeated exposure shapes behavior. Someone targeted often may begin to seek exclusivity as proof of value. They may distrust information shared openly, assuming truth only comes in whispers. They may confuse secrecy with authenticity. This distorted view traps them in cycles of manipulation, where they look for signs they are special and ignore evidence to the contrary. The exclusivity illusion rests on a simple idea: what feels rare feels valuable. By pretending information or access is rare, manipulators exploit the desire to be chosen. It bypasses reason and feeds emotion, binding people to false privileges. The tactic works not because of content, but because of framing. It does not need to offer real advantage. It only needs to make someone believe they alone have it.